Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I don't know about you, but personally I've always felt like there's a very unique dreamlike quality that Japan has. The people, the culture, the cities and villages, everything is just so different from any other country in the world. But as it is with everything else, nothing is perfect, and neither is Japan. In fact, today's video is exactly about that. The side of Japan that is not so perfect and dreamlike. And you know how that saying goes, as above, so below. It means things in this universe usually have equal counterparts. Like if a person seems too perfect on the surface, they're probably hiding their equally dark and destructive side from society. Well, it applies to Japan really well, because just like its beautiful side is unmatched globally, so is its dark and evil side. I mean, I don't over-exaggerate what I say just to sort of sell my video to the viewers. And I'm telling you, the crimes from Japan do qualify as the worst in the world and in history. Anyway, let's start the video now. Enjoy. In Japan, cannibalism is often depicted in anime, but in real life, one man became famous after killing a foreign woman and eating her flesh. This is the story of Issei Sagawa, a Japanese man who got away with cannibalism in France and later became a public figure in Japan. The story begins on June 13, 1981, in the Bois de Boulogne, a large park in Paris. That day, two joggers found two suitcases floating in a lake. Inside, they discovered the dismembered body of a woman. The police quickly started searching for a suspect. Witnesses reported seeing the suitcases, and one key tip came from a taxi driver. He said that on June 13th, he had picked up a small Asian man with two extremely heavy suitcases. He even joked, "Are you getting rid of a body based on how heavy they were?" Using the driver's description and pickup location, police identified a suspect. On June 15, 1981, police raided the suspect's home. Inside, they found a body part cooking in a frying pan and the victim's ID. The man was arrested immediately. He showed no remorse and even had a calm expression. The victim was 25-year-old Renee Hartevelt, a Dutch student at Sorbonne University. She had visited the home of 32-year-old Sagawa, a fellow doctoral student, to help him translate a German poem. While others avoided Sagawa, Hartevelt had shown him kindness, as he was a lonely foreigner. However, Sagawa had different intentions. Sagawa had planned to eat Hartevelt and prepared a knife, a box cutter, and a gun. When she arrived, he tried to touch her, but when she rejected him, he shot her in the head. He then performed necrophilia before cutting up her body, taking 30 photos to document the process. He kept some body parts in the fridge and cooked others. After his arrest, he said, "I had a great desire to eat her. I thought that if I did, she would become a part of me forever." As a child, he became interested in cannibalism after his uncle read him a fairy tale about kidnapping and eating children. In high school, he met with a psychiatrist, but his condition was not considered serious. Then, in 1972, at 22 years old, he broke into a German woman's home while studying at Wako University. His goal was not rape, but to cut off and eat part of her body. She woke up, overpowered him, and escaped. His father, Akira Sagawa, a wealthy businessman, paid to settle the case. Sagawa was insecure about his small size, only 151 centimeters tall and weighing 48 kilograms. He became obsessed with tall white women, not in a romantic way, but because he wanted to eat them. After his crime, he said he felt weak and believed eating strong Western women would make him stronger. Since Sagawa was a Japanese national who committed a crime in France against a Dutch victim, the case became complicated. He confessed to the crime but was sent to a mental hospital for evaluation. His father hired a lawyer who argued that Sagawa was being held too long without trial. In October 1982, a French court ruled that he was insane and could not be prosecuted. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital indefinitely. However, in 1984, French authorities unexpectedly deported Sagawa to Japan. The decision was controversial, as some believed he was only deported because his victim was not French. Hartevelt's family was told that he would face trial in Japan, but this never happened. Since he had not been convicted in France, the case records were sealed, making it impossible to try him in Japan. He was held at Matsuzawa Hospital in Tokyo, where Japanese doctors declared him sane. Since Japan did not accept the French case files, they had no legal grounds to punish him. Less than 2 years later, on August 12, 1986, he was released. This meant that Sagawa never faced any real punishment. After his release, the Japanese media turned him into a celebrity. He said, "The press made me the godfather of cannibalism, and I am happy about that. I will always see the world as a cannibal." He wrote a book called In the Fog, where he graphically described how different parts of Hardevelt's body tasted. He even insulted her, writing that after eating her, he held up her head and said, "You were really tasty." His book sold over 500,000 copies and was translated into multiple languages. Sagawa appeared in adult films, drawing attention for acting alongside white actresses. He was even invited onto a cooking show where he talked about eating raw meat. He starred in a commercial and made money by drawing nude women. From 1986 to 1997, he lived like a celebrity. However, with the rise of the internet in the late 1990s, more people condemned his crimes. While other cannibals existed, he was the only one who turned his crime into a business. His lack of remorse and constant smiling on TV disgusted many. Eventually, his father's company collapsed, leaving him in financial ruin. In 2005, his father died from a stroke. At his funeral, Sagawa's mother ignored him, and shortly after, she committed suicide. In her will, she stated that her husband's inheritance should not go to their son. Left without financial support, Sagawa moved into a small apartment provided by his younger brother. In 2013, at 64 years old, Sagawa suffered a stroke, leaving him unable to move. His condition worsened over time. On November 24, 2022, at the age of 73, Issei Sagawa died of pneumonia, and his family held a small funeral on December 2, 2022. Hikari City Mother and Child Murder Case. In 1999, an 18-year-old with a twisted mind came up with a horrible plan. He dressed up as a handyman and went door to door, looking for women who were home alone. After knocking on a few doors, he managed to enter one house by pretending he was there for work. Inside, he found a woman, and things quickly turned violent. He attacked and killed her. But the nightmare didn't end there. The woman wasn't alone. Her 11-month-old baby was in the house too. The baby's cries filled the air, and instead of leaving, the killer took the child's life as well. It didn't take long for the police to catch him. When they questioned him, his answers were deeply disturbing. He showed almost no emotion about what he had done. When asked about the baby, he coldly said, "I wasn't trying to kill the infant. I just tied a bow around its neck to make it stop crying." His actions were even more horrifying because, after killing the woman, he sexually assaulted her. He later claimed he did this because he had read in a novel that it was part of a resurrection ritual. The killer was first given a life sentence. However, this was later changed to the death penalty. This decision sparked huge debate in Japan. At the time, Japan's law considered people under 20 as minors, meaning that, legally, he wasn't seen as an adult. But after committing such brutal crimes at 18, many believed he was old enough to face the ultimate punishment. Maria Ouchi. In December 2014, police in Nagoya City received a missing persons report for 77-year-old Tomoko Mori. Her husband reported her missing after she vanished while out sharing her faith, something she often did as a devout Jehovah's Witness. For over a month, Tomoko's whereabouts remained a mystery. During the investigation, police kept coming across the name Maria Ouchi, a young woman who had been seen with Tomoko before her disappearance. At first, it seemed unlikely that Maria was involved. She was just a student. But as they looked deeper, all the clues kept leading back to her. When police finally reached out to Maria's parents, they learned she had been living with them in a different city for about a month. On January 26, 2015, Maria returned to Nagoya and voluntarily went to the police station for questioning. That's when she led officers to her apartment, where they made a horrifying discovery. In her bathroom, they found Tomoko's body. She was fully dressed, with a scarf wrapped around her neck, lying on the floor with dried blood around her. She had multiple injuries, likely from a sharp object. After police had seen all of this, Maria was obviously arrested immediately. But what led to all of this, and were there any other crimes as well that she committed? Let's find out. Maria was born in Sendai in 1995 and was the oldest of two daughters. Her father, once an agricultural researcher, later managed an apartment complex. But her relationship with him was tense. She later claimed he was controlling. Her mother, who had worked as a store clerk, quit her job after Maria's crimes, unable to face the public. Maria's behavior started changing in elementary school. In Japan, how children address their parents reflects their relationship with them. Most kids call their mother mama and their father papa, showing warmth and respect. But Maria stopped calling her mother mama and instead used her first name. She also stopped calling her father papa and switched to waji, a rough masculine term often used by boys. She also changed how she referred to herself, using a masculine word for I and sometimes adding sama, a term that elevates oneself, making it sound arrogant, almost like calling herself the Great Me. By second grade, Maria had already stolen stationery, brushing it off by saying, "Everyone else does it." This hinted at a deeper problem. She didn't seem to understand right from wrong. People who knew her described her as unusual but well-liked, cheerful, and surrounded by friends. But beneath her friendly exterior, she had a strange fascination with crime, murder, and disturbing pranks. In sixth grade, Maria took her pranks to a new level. She tried to poison her male teacher by slipping boric acid, a toxic substance used in insecticides, into his lunch. When that plan failed because a friend lost the substance, she settled for putting staples and eraser shavings into his food instead. In middle school, Maria's interests became even darker. She was obsessed with Tsutomu Miyazaki and Sato Sakakibara, two of Japan's most notorious child killers. She admired their ability to commit brutal crimes and even started collecting survival knives online. At home, her behavior terrified her younger sister. Maria would threaten her and wave knives and axes around, keeping her silent out of fear. When she entered high school, Maria's choices made her stand out. She cut her hair short and wore a boy's uniform instead of the standard girl's attire. Despite her unusual behavior, she was well-liked, described as intelligent, athletic, and charismatic. After high school, she got into Nagoya University's prestigious science department. Living alone, she joined the cheerleading squad and piano club, blending into college life. But according to her mother, Maria had already started experimenting with drugs, saying it was natural since she was studying science. After Maria's arrest for Tomoko's murder, police questioned her extensively. What started as a missing persons case soon unraveled into something much more sinister. During the interrogation, Maria confessed to several other crimes, later known as the thallium incidents. It turned out she had been poisoning people for years. On May 27, 2012, while still in high school, Maria invited an old classmate to a karaoke bar. There, she slipped thallium sulfate, a deadly poison, into her friend's drink. Her friend immediately noticed something was wrong and spit it out, but it was too late. She later suffered hair loss, numbness in her limbs, and other severe symptoms. At the time, doctors couldn't figure out what was causing her illness. Maria didn't stop there. From May to July 2012, she poisoned more male classmates. One boy became so sick that he was hospitalized in October. The poisoning left him with severe vision loss, forcing him to transfer to a special needs class, changing his life forever. When asked why she did it, Maria's answer was chilling. She wasn't angry at them. She just wanted to see what poison could do. In 2014, the same year she murdered Tomoko, she experimented with Molotov cocktails. She set at least 2 fires. On August 29, 2014, she tried to burn down a house in Sendai, but wasn't caught. On December 13th, just a week after murdering Tomoko, she set fire to another house. This time, an elderly woman died in the blaze. When questioned, Maria claimed she had targeted the wrong house. Her real goal? To see a burned corpse. On December 7, 2014, Tomoko Mori attended a meeting where she met Maria. Maria pretended to be interested in learning about her faith, and Tomoko, eager to share, accepted an invitation to Maria's apartment. But as soon as they arrived, Maria attacked her. She struck Tomoko's head multiple times with an axe, then strangled her with a scarf. Afterward, she dragged the body into the bathroom and took photos, calling them records of the experiment result. The next day, she left town and returned to her parents' home, leaving Tomoko's body behind. Maria's crimes shocked Japan. Because of their severity, she was prosecuted as an adult. During her trial, her lack of remorse was chilling. When asked why she killed Tomoko, she simply replied, "I just wanted to kill someone." Even in court, she said she still had the urge to kill. She admitted she liked seeing the judge, attorneys, and prosecutors wearing ties because she imagined strangling them with them. Her disturbing comments and lack of regret led the court to make an exception to the law protecting minors' identities. Maria's name and face were published in Japanese media. She was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and arson. Maria Ouchi remains one of Japan's most terrifying cases of a killer driven purely by curiosity. Someone who didn't kill out of hatred or revenge, but simply to see what would happen. In 2014, a 16-year-old girl, let's call her Heather, was already showing disturbing behavior. She had frequent emotional outbursts, enjoyed killing cats, and had even tried to murder her own father by attacking him with a baseball bat while he slept. Instead of reporting her or getting her help, Heather's family decided to send her away. They got her an apartment in the city, hoping that living alone would somehow fix the problem. But this turned out to be the worst decision they could have made. One day, Heather invited a classmate, Iwa Matsuo, over to her apartment to hang out. Iwa was a 16-year-old bright, friendly, and trusting student. She had no reason to suspect anything bad would happen. But she had no idea that Heather had already told her stepmother that she was curious about killing people. On July 26th, when Iwa arrived at Heather's place, she walked straight into a trap. Heather attacked her from behind with a hammer and then strangled her to death. This wasn't an accident or done out of anger. Heather had planned it. She simply wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone and cut up their body. When Iwa didn't come home, her mother called the police. The next day, on July 27th, officers arrived at Heather's apartment and found Iwa's dismembered body. Heather wasn't there at the time, but police found her nearby. At first, she denied even knowing Iwa, which made no sense. What was she trying to claim? That someone else broke in, killed Iwa, and left her body there? Eventually, though, she admitted to the murder. Heather was sent to a juvenile facility for treatment, but the story didn't end there. Her father, overwhelmed with guilt, took his own life, saying he didn't deserve to live. Japan is known for its advanced technology, and one of the most famous examples is its vending machines. You can find everything in them, from drinks and hot coffee to soup, umbrellas, and even electronics. Tourists love discovering the unusual items these machines offer, often sharing their finds online. Meanwhile, locals rely on them for daily convenience, sometimes even getting lucky by finding a free drink or some loose change nearby. But what if that luck takes a dark turn? In 1985, Japan was shaken by a string of deaths linked to something as ordinary as bottled vitamin drinks from vending machines. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate, carefully planned murders. On May 30th, 1985, a 45-year-old truck driver died after being sick for nearly a month. When doctors examined his body, they found something alarming: high levels of paraquat dichloride, a deadly herbicide used for killing weeds. At the time, paraquat was common in Japan's agriculture, but it was also extremely toxic to humans. Even a tiny amount could cause severe damage, either killing within hours or dragging the victim through days of agonizing illness. Exposure to paraquat could burn the skin, damage blood vessels, and if swallowed, destroy tissues in the throat and lungs. Shockingly, in 1985, it was easy to get paraquat. You didn't need a prescription or even an ID, just proof that you needed it for farming. When investigators looked into the truck driver's case, they considered two possibilities: suicide or murder. They questioned his family and friends, and a disturbing discovery emerged. The man had stopped at a vending machine one day after work, where he spotted a bottle of Oronamin C, a popular vitamin drink, already sitting in the takeout slot. Thinking nothing of it, he took the bottle and drank it. Soon after, he began vomiting violently and was rushed to the hospital, where his health rapidly declined. At first, authorities thought he might have accidentally poisoned himself, perhaps by mishandling paraquat at work. After all, it only took 8 to 16 milliliters, less than a tablespoon, to kill a healthy adult, and there was no antidote at the time. But then, another death occurred. On September 5th, A 44-year-old executive named Takahashi Sakai bought 2 bottles of Oronamen C from a vending machine. He died 6 weeks later. Then, on September 11th, a 52-year-old man in Osaka grabbed 2 bottles of Oronamen C from a vending machine after a fishing trip. He took them home, unaware of the danger. 3 days later, he was dead, and paraquat was found in the leftover drinks. On September 12th, a 22-year-old student in Matsusaka City found what seemed like a lucky extra bottle of real gold, another vitamin drink, sitting in a vending machine takeout slot. He took it home, but 2 days later, he was dead. Tests revealed diquat, another toxic herbicide, in his body and the drink. A week later, on September 19th, a 30-year-old man in Imabari town found a bottle of Coca-Cola under a vending machine. He drank it, not thinking twice. Almost immediately, he felt sick and collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite their efforts, he died 3 days later. These were not isolated incidents. By the end of 1985, 12 people across Japan had fallen victim to poisoned drinks. The deaths were scattered across the country, with most occurring in western and central Japan and Tokyo. The victims ranged from a 17-year-old teenager to a 69-year-old man. Investigators soon realized why Oronamen C was the most commonly used drink in the poisonings. At the time, its manufacturer, Otsuka Pharmaceutical, was running a buy one get one free promotion to attract younger consumers. The killer took advantage of this campaign, planting poisoned drinks near vending machines so victims would assume they had simply gotten lucky with a free extra bottle. Solving the case, however, was almost impossible. In 1985, vending machines didn't have surveillance cameras, leaving authorities with no footage to review. The bottles were carefully handled, no fingerprints, no DNA, no clues. And then, the poisoning suddenly stopped. With no new victims, the case quickly went cold. Investigators were left wondering why people didn't notice that the drinks had been tampered with. To understand this, they looked back at a similar case from 1977, when Coca-Cola bottles laced with cyanide killed several people in Tokyo and Osaka. That case had made people fearful of vending machines, but in response, beverage companies started using tamper-evident packaging, such as plastic seals and pull tabs. However, in 1985, Japan was still in the middle of transitioning to these safety measures. Many people weren't yet used to checking bottle seals, making it easy for them to miss the signs of tampering. Despite an extensive investigation, no suspect was ever identified, and the statute of limitations expired in 1992. Authorities believed the crimes were committed by a single person, but they found no connection between the victims. There was no motive, no demands for money, and no threats sent to drink manufacturers like Otsuka or Coca-Cola Japan. In response to public fear, Japan's national police launched a nationwide campaign warning people to inspect drinks before consuming them. They put up 1.3 million warning stickers on vending machines and ran ads in newspapers urging caution. With no answers, theories about the killer's motives spread. Some experts suggested that the crimes reflected deeper social issues. Japan's strict, work-focused culture often caused extreme stress, leading some individuals to lash out in unpredictable ways. A criminal psychology professor in Tokyo speculated that the killer may have been taking out their frustrations on random people. Another expert, Susumu Uda, believed the culprit enjoyed the thrill of seeing victims suffer, a behavior known in Japan as yukaihan, a term describing criminals who harm others purely for the power and excitement of it. The case also inspired copycat crimes, with several people attempting similar poisonings in the following months. Some even faked poisonings for attention. In one case, a high school student in Osaka poisoned his own drink, hoping to be hospitalized and gain sympathy from his classmates. Though the original 1985 case faded into history, the fear never fully disappeared. In 2019, police in Akita Prefecture found a beer can laced with pesticides in a vending machine takeout slot. A man noticed an extra can pop out with his purchase and found it suspicious. Upon inspection, the can had a tiny hole in the bottom, leaking an odd blue liquid. Though authorities investigated, they never found a suspect. The Wednesday Strangler. To this day, Japan still has no answers in the case of the Wednesday Strangler. Over a span of 14 years, multiple women went missing and their bodies were later found. All but one of them disappeared on a Wednesday. Between 1975 and 1989, 7 women vanished and were later found dead. 5 of them were confirmed to have been strangled. The other 2 may have been strangled as well, but their remains were too damaged to say for sure. Aside from the Wednesday pattern and the method of killing, there didn't seem to be any connection between the victims. Their ages ranged from 11 to 50 years old. They had different jobs and they lived in different places. 3 of the victims were found dumped off a cliff in Kitagata-cho, which led to this part of the case being called the Kitagata Affair. A suspect was arrested for those 3 murders, but due to lack of evidence, he was later acquitted. Even the police admitted they had messed up. They interrogated him too aggressively and might have accidentally given away too much information about the case. Eventually, the statute of limitations expired, meaning these crimes could no longer be prosecuted, and the case remains unsolved. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not convinced one person was behind all of this. A Wednesday pattern over 14 years doesn't feel like the strongest connection. Plus, how easy would it be for a copycat killer to take someone on a Wednesday just to throw off investigators? This is the story of Tomohiro Sato. It all started on January 15, 2012 in Asahikawa City, Hokkaido. It was a freezing, snowy night, but the city was still bustling. Most people were indoors, staying warm with their families. But inside the Sato household, things were far from peaceful. Neighbors later reported hearing loud shouting from the house, a boy and a woman arguing. Their voices grew louder until there was a sudden bang, followed by the sound of something breaking. The next day, local police received a report that 13-year-old Tomu Sato was missing. Tomu was a bright and well-liked boy in his community. His parents had divorced when he was just 2 years old, and he was raised by his mother, Mai, along with his younger sister, Aika. Little is known about his father or why his parents separated. Tomu was popular and admired by his friends. He once told people he wanted to become a doctor so he could take care of his mother. His academic achievements were impressive. He had passed the entrance exam for a highly competitive junior high school connected to Hokkaido University of Education. The events leading to Tomu's disappearance began on January 14, 2012, the day before he went missing. While their mother was out, Tomu and his sister got into an argument over what to watch on TV. Tomu wanted to watch Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, while Aika wanted to watch a drama called Perfect Son. What started as a small disagreement quickly escalated into yelling. In a fit of frustration, Tomu did something shocking. He threw his Nintendo DS against the wall, shattering it. This was significant because he had bought the DS with money he earned from helping his mother with chores. Breaking something so valuable suggested he was dealing with deeper emotions. Still angry, he punched the wall, leaving a hole in it before storming off to his room. The next day, their mother, Mai, returned home and saw the damage. She asked Tomu to clean up and apologize to his sister. While he was cleaning, she noticed the broken DS and asked him what happened. Tomu, still upset, snapped, "I bought it with my own money. I can do whatever I want with it." He ignored his mother and locked himself in his room. Mai assumed he just needed time to cool off and left him alone. But around 9:15 p.m., she heard the front door slam shut. She thought he had gone out to clear his head and would be back soon. But as time passed, she grew worried. It was freezing outside, and he had left wearing only a t-shirt and thin pants. She searched the house, hoping he had come back without her noticing, but he was nowhere to be found. She did find that his jacket and wallet were missing, but his wallet only contained 1,000 yen, about $10, and a few bus tickets. His phone was still in his room, meaning she had no way to contact him. Panicked, Mai rushed outside into the heavy snowfall to search for her son. That night, temperatures dropped to -5°C, and she feared the worst. The next day, Mai reported Tomu missing, and police launched a large-scale search. Given how cold it was and how lightly he was dressed, they believed he couldn't have gone far. They checked surveillance footage and interviewed taxi drivers, but found no trace of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the snow melted, the search intensified. Helicopters scanned rivers, and search teams combed through forests and fields. Still, there was no sign of Tomoe. Some people feared he had died in the cold and was buried under the snow, but no evidence supported this theory. Posters with Tomoe's face were put up across the city and shared online. His mother and sister even appeared on TV, pleading for information. Aika created a Twitter account to spread awareness, though her last post was in 2015. During a TV appearance, Aika expressed deep guilt, blaming herself for their argument, which may have driven her brother to leave. Years later, Mai received two eerie messages, one on August 15, 2016, and another on August 14, 2019. Both contained the exact same words, "Help Tomoe," written in katakana. The messages came from a public phone, making it impossible to trace the sender. Was it really Tomoe, or was someone playing a cruel prank? Despite reporting the messages to police, no new leads emerged. The family also received strange phone calls from unknown numbers. When they answered, the caller remained silent before hanging up. Over the years, there have been multiple alleged sightings of Tomoe. In 2015, someone claimed to have seen him working as a host in Kabukicho, Tokyo's nightlife district. Hosts entertain female clients in clubs, and this particular host reportedly had a birthmark between his eyebrows, just like Tomoe. He also said he had run away from home in Asahikawa, matching Tomoe's background. However, some believe this was just a coincidence. In host clubs, it's common for hosts to invent tragic backstories to gain sympathy and money. Other reports placed Tomoe in Shinjuku's LGBTQ+ district, where someone resembling him was allegedly working in a host club that catered to male customers. Another sighting placed him in Ikebukuro, near a department store. Several theories have emerged over the years. Some believe Tomoe left home intentionally. Though his mother claimed he had little money, he could have hidden extra cash or hitchhiked to avoid detection. Another theory is that he went to his father. Some find it odd that Tomoe's father never spoke publicly about his disappearance. However, police would have investigated this early on, and no evidence linked him to the case. Some believe Tomoe may have been abducted, possibly for human trafficking. His good looks could have made him a target. One theory suggests he died that night. Others think Tomoe may have frozen to death, fallen into a river, or even taken his own life. His sudden outburst, destroying his DS, could have been a sign of deep emotional distress. And the final theory is that his mother was involved. Some suspect Mai might have been involved in Tomoe's disappearance. Could she have harmed him in a moment of anger and hidden his body in the snow? Her appearance on a 2019 TV show sparked controversy. Many viewers criticized her for wearing heavy makeup and eyelash extensions, feeling it was inappropriate for a grieving mother. However, others defended her, noting she had a heart condition and may have worn makeup to hide her pale appearance. The Tsuchiura Serial Murders. This case began when a man decided he wanted to die, but not by his own hand. Instead, he wanted the death penalty and set out on a killing spree to make it happen. In 2008, a 24-year-old man, let's call him Ken, had reached his breaking point. He was struggling with school, unemployment, and deep loneliness. Up until then, he had used video games as a way to escape his depression and suicidal thoughts. At some point, Ken convinced himself that the only way to die was through execution. So, he started looking for victims. At first, he thought about attacking a school, believing that would guarantee him the death penalty. But he changed his mind because there were too many adults around. Instead, he randomly stabbed an elderly man, marking the start of his rampage. His attacks continued in Tokyo, where his desire for attention fueled his actions even more. He went to Arakawa Oki Station and stabbed multiple people, killing 2 and seriously injuring several others. Eventually, he turned himself in, hoping to get exactly what he wanted, the death penalty. During his trial, doctors diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder. However, despite this diagnosis, the court ruled that he was mentally stable and fully responsible for his actions. Ken got what he wanted, a death sentence. He accepted it without any appeal. The way society treats people with disabilities, whether physical or mental, reflects its values and ethics. Everyone deserves the same respect and dignity, regardless of ability. However, Attitudes toward disabled individuals vary widely across cultures, and unfortunately, some perceptions are not only dismissive, but outright cruel. Today we will examine a horrifying case where such negative views led to a terrible tragedy, the Sagamihara Stabbings, committed by Satoshi Uematsu. Despite legal reforms aimed at increasing accessibility and reducing discrimination, many disabled individuals still report facing prejudice. A 2023 survey published by the Japan Times found that around 90% of disabled people in Japan experience discrimination. Traditional societal views sometimes affect family dynamics as well. A notable example is the Japanese singer Miki Sakai, whose in-laws were ashamed of her daughter's Down syndrome. Her father-in-law even went so far as to hide her existence, only acknowledging her when he himself became incapacitated. Many disabled individuals end up in care homes because their families cannot support them. However, some maintain strong connections with their families. It was within one such care home that the horrifying events of the Sagamihara Stabbings took place. Tsukuyama, a residential care center in Kanagawa Prefecture, was run by the Kanagawa Kyudokai Social Welfare Organization. This large facility housed over 120 residents who were cared for by staff and volunteers. Located near the banks of the Sagami River, the facility had a peaceful, home-like atmosphere. However, after a brutal mass killing, the once thriving care home was demolished, leaving only the gymnasium and administration building standing. In July 2016, the facility became the site of one of Japan's deadliest mass murders. In a single night, a former caretaker, 26-year-old Satoshi Uematsu, murdered 19 disabled residents and injured 26 others. Just 2 hours after the attack, he turned himself in to the police, grinning as he handed over a bag of blood-stained knives. His eerie smile and apparent lack of remorse left officers deeply disturbed. He was not just a killer, he was proud of what he had done. Satoshi Uematsu was born in January 1990 near Tokyo to an artistic family. His mother was a cartoonist, and his father was an elementary school art teacher. The family moved to Sagamihara when Satoshi was 1 year old and settled there permanently. During his early school years, he was popular among his peers, known for his humor and charm. However, Satoshi changed dramatically during high school. Once seen as well-mannered, he began engaging in reckless behavior, including theft and property damage. He also started drinking at a young age, which worsened his erratic actions. Despite these issues, he was accepted into university, where he developed an interest in tattoos, something still heavily stigmatized in Japan due to its association with the Yakuza. Unbothered by societal norms, he covered his chest and arms in tattoos, dreaming of becoming a tattoo artist. However, that ambition never came to fruition. In 2012, Satoshi took a part-time job as a caregiver at Tsukuyama. Surprisingly, he initially performed well, despite a past incident in 2007 where he allegedly shoved a wheelchair-bound resident. It's unclear if this event was ever formally documented or if he faced any consequences. Despite this history, Satoshi was promoted to a full-time position in April 2013. His colleagues saw him as a clever and dedicated worker, and he even described the disabled residents as cute. However, this perception would not last. By 2014 and 2015, he was seen physically striking residents, leading to multiple investigations and warnings from his supervisors. His behavior grew increasingly volatile. In February 2016, after yet another incident of resident abuse, he resigned. Unemployed and resentful, his hatred toward disabled individuals intensified. Soon after leaving his job, Satoshi developed what he believed was a revolutionary idea. Reflecting on his time at the care facility, he saw the struggles of the residents, their families, and the staff. Instead of viewing it as a call for more support and compassion, he came to a chilling conclusion. He thought society would be better off if disabled people were eliminated entirely. Believing his idea was so important that it needed to be heard, he decided to take action. That same month, he visited the home of Tadamori Oshima, the Speaker of Japan's House of Representatives, to personally deliver a letter. In it, he proposed legalizing euthanasia for people with disabilities, arguing that it would relieve families of their burden and prevent World War III. Even more disturbingly, he detailed his willingness to carry out the killings himself. He claimed he could erase 200 to 400 disabled individuals without harming staff members. The letter included his full name, address, and other personal details, clearly indicating he was serious. At first, when authorities read the letter, they thought it was either a sick joke or a sign of mental instability. But recognizing the potential danger, they detained Satoshi for questioning. However, instead of being charged, he was sent to a psychiatric ward for evaluation. Shockingly, just 2 weeks later, in early March, he was released. The doctor in charge determined that he was not a threat, a grave miscalculation that would soon prove catastrophic. On July 25, 2016, Satoshi retrieved his car from his family home, gathered several knives, and purchased a hammer and zip ties from a hardware store. He then drove to Shinjuku, where he rented a hotel room and dyed his hair blonde. At around 1:37 a.m., on July 26th, security cameras captured his black Honda pulling up to Tsukuyamayurien. Using his knowledge of the facility, he entered through a back window, breaking it open with a hammer. He immediately overpowered an on-duty staff member, binding and gagging them before stealing the master key. With unrestricted access, Satoshi moved through the facility methodically, stabbing sleeping residents in the neck, one by one. By the time he was finished, 19 people, aged 18 to 70, were dead, and 26 others were wounded, 13 of them critically. After his rampage, Satoshi posted on Twitter about world peace before calmly driving away. It wasn't long before police arrived, responding to the horrifying scene. At least 29 ambulances were dispatched, and devastated neighbors watched as victims were carried away to 6 different hospitals. Families of the victims were left in utter shock and grief. Following his arrest, Satoshi underwent psychiatric evaluations to determine if he was legally responsible for his actions. While he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, causing him to see himself as superior and a savior, he was found mentally competent. In February 2019, he was formally charged with 19 counts of murder, 24 counts of attempted murder, and multiple other offenses. During his trial, his defense team argued that marijuana use had impaired his judgment, but Satoshi himself showed no remorse. He refused to apologize and continued expressing his belief that disabled people served no purpose in life. At one point, he even attempted to bite off his own finger as a supposed apology to the victims' families, an act that only deepened their pain. On March 16, 2020, the Yokohama District Court sentenced him to death. The judge ruled that Satoshi's crimes were not the result of a mental illness, but rather a reflection of his deeply held beliefs. Satoshi did not appeal his sentence. In April 2022, he requested a retrial but was denied in April 2023. He remains on death row at the Tokyo Detention Center. The Nagasaki Stalker Murder. In 2010, a man and a woman met on a Japanese dating app and quickly started a relationship. They went from chatting online to moving in together at an alarming speed, something that worried the woman's family. But to her, it felt like the start of a great romance. At first, the man, Tsui, was charming and caring, which is what drew her in. But as time passed, he became controlling and even abusive. He started making strict rules, limiting her freedom and isolating her from her family. The emotional and mental abuse soon turned physical. He began hurting her over the smallest things. By October 2011, her family noticed something was seriously wrong. They suspected she was being abused and, with police help, managed to get her out of the situation. She was taken away from their shared home and brought back to live with her family. That should have been the end of this nightmare. Even after their separation, Tsui couldn't let go. He started stalking and harassing her and her family, sending them threats. Then, on December 16, 2011, things took a horrifying turn. Tsui broke into her family's home and murdered her 77-year-old grandmother and 56-year-old mother before fleeing. It didn't take long for police to find him. With DNA evidence and other proof, he was quickly arrested and later sentenced to death. A small village was thrown into darkness when a 21-year-old man named Mutsuo Toi cut the electricity line. Wearing flashlights strapped to his head, he moved through the darkness in a way that eerily resembled a local tradition called yobai, or night crawling. In just an hour and a half, almost half the village's population was either killed or seriously injured. This horrifying event happened on the night of May 21st, 1938, in the rural village of Kayo near Tsuyama in Okayama Prefecture, which was then part of the Empire of Japan. Mutsuo Toi was born on March 5, 1917, in Okayama Prefecture, likely in the Chugoku Mountains on the northern side of the region. At the time, Japan was becoming more industrialized. Little is known about his parents, but they were fairly well off. Mutsuo was their second child and only son, with an older sister. Unfortunately, his happy childhood was cut short when both of his parents died from tuberculosis while he was still a baby. At the time, tuberculosis was the second leading cause of death in Japan, and there was no cure. After his parents' passing, Mutsuo and his sister were taken in by their grandmother. They first lived in a temple before settling in her home in Kayo. Kayo was a small, picturesque village surrounded by mountains. Most of the villagers were farmers, celebrating harvests with festivals and occasionally hunting wild boars. Though somewhat isolated, the village was not completely disconnected from the outside world. It even had a telephone pole. Despite having an older sister, Mutsuo was considered the head of his household, as daughters were not traditionally given that role in Japan. His grandmother had land and a steady income from farming, providing him with a stable upbringing. He occasionally helped her with farm work. Mutsuo attended Nishikamo Elementary School, where he was known as a bright and talented student. Though there are no records of his personality, people generally liked him, making him seem like a model child. But things were not always easy for him. At 14, he was diagnosed with pleurisy, a painful lung condition that made it hard to breathe. Doctors told him to avoid physical activity, which was frustrating for a teenager. After 3 months, his condition improved, and he was able to return to school. Although people in the village liked him, some felt his friendly personality was fake. He was described as pessimistic, and despite being sociable, he never formed close relationships. Mutsuo deeply loved his older sister, looking up to her as a role model. However, when she got married in 1934, he felt abandoned. This made him withdraw from social life. By 17, he had become a hikikomori, a social recluse, avoiding interactions with others. At 20, Mutsuo wanted to join the military, which would have been an honorable achievement for his family. He passed most of the tests, but the army doctor found tuberculosis in his lungs, making him ineligible for service. This was devastating for Mutsuo. When he returned to the village, word had already spread about his rejection. He felt like people saw him differently, deepening his sense of isolation. He rarely left his house after that. During this time, Mutsuo became obsessed with a crime story, the case of Sada Abe, a geisha who strangled her lover and cut off his genitals as a keepsake. He was so fascinated that he even wrote a novel, Yuto Kayomaru, inspired by the incident. Japan had many old traditions related to sex, one of which was yobai, or night crawling. This practice allowed unmarried men to sneak into women's houses at night to propose a sexual relationship. If the woman agreed, it could lead to marriage. Mutsuo was an active participant in yobai, and at first, many women accepted his advances. However, when the villagers learned about his tuberculosis, women began rejecting him. Even those who had been in relationships with him in the past wanted nothing to do with him. These constant rejections filled him with resentment. Mutsuo told an acquaintance that if he was going to die from tuberculosis anyway, he might as well commit crimes worse than Sada Abe's. People began noticing his dark thoughts, and some even reported him to the police. The authorities confiscated his firearms and revoked his gun license. But somehow, Mutsuo managed to keep or acquire another hunting rifle and ammunition. The villagers believed the police had taken care of the problem, thinking Mutsuo was now harmless and would simply waste away. They were wrong. On the night of May 20, 1938, heavy rain poured over the village. As everyone was asleep, Mutsuo made his move. At around 1 a.m., he climbed a telephone pole and cut the village's power line, plunging the entire area into darkness. Then, he went home, put on his military uniform, and strapped a katana and several knives to his waist. He loaded his hunting rifle with 200 rounds of ammunition and carried an axe. Finally, he strapped 2 flashlights to his head, imitating the night-crawling tradition. His killing spree began at home. Mutsuo entered his grandmother's bedroom. The woman who had raised him since he was 2 was sleeping soundly. With tears in his eyes, he raised his axe and decapitated her in one swing. His grandmother was his first victim, but he had many more in mind. Stepping outside, he began his killing spree. At the time, many villagers left their doors unlocked, making it easy for Mutsuo to enter their homes. Armed with a rifle, he showed no mercy, killing men, women, and children, including former lovers, the elderly, and even pregnant women. Blood stained every home he entered. His victims ranged in age from just 5 years old to 86. It seemed Mutsuo had a list of priority targets. He even traveled several kilometers to track some of them down. When he arrived at a house, both his intended victims and the homeowners were slaughtered. Near the end of his rampage, he arrived at the home of Matsugi Takeda, a 66-year-old man. Mutsuo let himself in and found the family sleeping. When Matsugi woke up and saw an armed intruder, he assumed it was a robbery and feared for his family's lives. But Mutsuo told him not to be afraid, he just needed a piece of paper. Panicked, Matsugi frantically searched but couldn't find one. Growing impatient, Mutsuo turned to Matsugi's young grandson and asked for his notebook and a pencil. The child obeyed, and Mutsuo tore a page from it. Before leaving, Mutsuo reassured them that he wouldn't harm innocent families. He looked at the young boy and encouraged him to study hard and become a great man one day. Then, he walked away. Finally, Mutsuo climbed to the summit of Mount Senjo. There, he took a moment to write his final words. When he finished, he knelt, looked toward the rising sun, aimed his rifle at his chest, and pulled the trigger. He was pronounced dead at around 5 a.m. on May 21, 1938. When authorities found his body, they also discovered his note, which revealed his reasons for the massacre. First, he expressed sorrow for killing his grandmother. He wrote that he took her life instantly because he didn't want her to live with the shame of being the grandmother of a murderer. He also apologized to his beloved sister, calling himself a boring, sickly brother. Mutsuo wrote that he had always felt like an outcast in the village and found the way people treated him oppressive. Even though his small family claimed to love him, he believed their love was mixed with pity. He argued that society should have more sympathy for those suffering from diseases like tuberculosis. In his note, he listed the people he blamed for shaping him into the person he had become. He resented his former lover, Yuriko Terakawa, for leaving him for another man, saying that if he had killed himself earlier, he could have spared himself the pain. He also blamed another past partner, Yoshiko Nishida, for rejecting him. He had a deep hatred for Suichi Terakawa, whom he saw as arrogant. Mutsuo believed Suichi had an easier time attracting women simply because he was rich. Mutsuo also mentioned that if he could be reborn, he wanted to return as a strong and healthy person so that no one would ever look down on him again. He was tired of his miserable life and wished that the gods would allow him to be happy in his next one. In total, 31 people lost their lives, including Mutsuo himself. Shortly after the massacre, Mutsuo's sister, the one he loved dearly, also passed away from tuberculosis. The village of Kayo was so traumatized by the tragedy that it changed its name, and many villagers moved away. Today, the area is mostly populated by elderly people who never left. Those who remain claim that no one has moved into the village since the massacre. The Shimoyama Incident. Another unsolved mystery in Japan, this case left people divided. Was a powerful man murdered, or did he take his own life after facing intense pressure and death threats? In 1949, Satonori Shimoyama, the first president of the Japanese National Railways, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The day before his death, on July 4, 1949, Shimoyama released a list of 30,000 railway employees who were going to be fired as part of budget cuts. As you can imagine, this decision didn't go over well. People were furious, and Shimoyama started receiving death threats, including from high-ranking U.S. military officials. The next morning, on July 5th, Shimoyama left his home around 8:20 a.m. He made a stop at a department store, which was the last place he was seen alive at 9:37 a.m. Then, just after midnight, his dismembered body was found on the railway tracks between two stations. It was obvious that he had been hit by a train, but something didn't add up. The autopsy suggested he might have already been dead before impact. He had internal bleeding from the train collision, but there was also significant blood loss from other injuries that didn't match the accident. This case led to countless conspiracy theories. Some believed that the US military was involved, possibly to weaken the Communist Party in Japan. Others thought it was revenge from employees who lost their jobs. And then there were those who believed the stress simply pushed Shimoyama to end his own life. At the time, forensic science was limited, making it hard for investigators to reach a solid conclusion. The police never released their findings to the public, only adding fuel to the theories. The Tokyo Subway Sarin Attack. Japan is famous for being one of the cleanest countries in the world. They've developed many ways to keep public spaces tidy, including different kinds of trash bins. But have you ever noticed that trash bins are hard to find in Japan? When you visit, you often have to carry your trash until you finally come across one. There's a reason for this, and it's not just about cleanliness. It's connected to a tragic event that changed Japan's trash bin policy, possibly forever. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, Tokyo was as busy as ever. People were commuting to work using the subway when, without warning, a deadly, invisible gas spread through 3 different train lines. That gas was sarin, a lethal nerve agent that's said to be 100 times more toxic than cyanide. Even a tiny amount can kill a person. Now imagine a large dose being released inside a packed subway train. The effects were devastating. Sarin had been used before, in 1988 during the Iran-Iraq War, but this was the first time it was used in an attack targeting civilians. The timing couldn't have been worse. It was rush hour, meaning thousands of people were inside the trains. The attack resulted in 13 deaths immediately, 50 people with severe, life-changing injuries, and over 5,000 people suffering from vision problems and other effects. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, trying to help those who had inhaled the gas. Meanwhile, an urgent investigation began. The attack shocked the nation. Who would commit such an act, and why? Authorities soon uncovered the shocking truth. The attack was carried out by Aum Shinrikyo, a dangerous Japanese doomsday cult. Aum Shinrikyo was founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. It originally started as a yoga school, but it eventually evolved into a religious movement that blended elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. The cult was obsessed with the end of the world and believed that Asahara was a divine figure who could guide them through an impending apocalypse. By the late 1980s, Aum Shinrikyo had thousands of followers and growing political ambitions. Asahara even ran for office in 1990, but after he lost, the cult took a darker turn. He told his followers that the world was corrupt and needed to be purified, which led to a series of violent crimes. The cult began developing chemical weapons, including sarin gas. They built labs, recruited scientists, and even tried to manufacture botulinum toxin, one of the deadliest poisons in the world. Their goal? To create mass destruction and seize power in Japan. On the morning of the attack, 5 teams of Aum Shinrikyo members entered the subway. Each team had a similar task: carry a plastic bag filled with sarin wrapped in newspaper, board a crowded subway train, puncture the bag using an umbrella with a sharpened tip, leave the scene before the gas spread. One attacker, Yasuo Hayashi, boarded a train near Akihabara Station. He placed the sarin-filled bag on the floor, punctured it, and quickly left. The gas started leaking, and within minutes, people collapsed. Similar attacks happened at other stations, causing panic throughout Tokyo's subway system. At first, no one understood what was happening. People were fainting, struggling to breathe, and going blind. Calls flooded into emergency services. It wasn't until 10 a.m. that forensic experts confirmed the substance was sarin. By then, the damage was already done. The attack was one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in Japan's history. As the investigation continued, authorities strongly suspected Aum Shinrikyo's involvement. Police raided the cult's headquarters and arrested multiple members, including high-ranking officials. Finally, on May 16, 1995, police arrested Shoko Asahara, the cult's leader. In total, 192 cult members were charged for various crimes related to Aum Shinrikyo, including the Sarin Attack. Asahara was sentenced to death, along with 12 other high-ranking members. The trials lasted over 7 years, and Asahara continued to claim he was innocent. However, in 2018, after decades of legal battles, all 13 sentenced members were executed. After the attack, Japan became extremely cautious about public safety. One major change was removing trash bins from public spaces, especially in train stations. Because the attackers had left their sarin-filled packages near trash bins. This made people afraid that terrorists could easily hide bombs or dangerous substances inside them. At first, some stations replaced bins with clear, see-through trash cans to make it easier to check for suspicious items. However, after the 2004 Madrid train bombings, Japan decided to remove most trash bins altogether. Survivors continue to suffer from long-term health effects, and families of the victims still struggle with grief. Although Aum Shinrikyo was officially disbanded in 2000, it never truly disappeared. Instead, it rebranded itself as Aleph and continued spreading its beliefs. Some members broke away and formed new religious groups, claiming they had distanced themselves from Asahara's teachings. Even today, the cult is still active. They recruit new followers through manga, anime, and even children's games featuring Asahara's image. For the victims and their families, knowing that the cult responsible for the worst terrorist attack in Japan's history is still operating is deeply painful. There are even theories that powerful figures in Japan's government or society may be protecting the cult for unknown reasons. However, there is no solid proof of this. In 2003, Fukuoka City became the stage for a horrifying crime committed by 3 exchange students who were struggling financially. What they initially saw as a quick way to make money quickly spiraled into a brutal massacre. The students became obsessed with a 41-year-old clothing retailer after spotting his Mercedes-Benz parked in the driveway. To them, the car symbolized wealth, and they assumed the house must be full of money. At first, they planned a robbery, but their mindset quickly shifted to a whatever-it-takes attitude, even if that meant murder. One night, they broke into the house through an unlocked window. Inside, they found the man's wife relaxing in the bathtub and drowned her on the spot. Moving through the home, they discovered the couple's young son asleep on the bottom bunk of his bed and suffocated him. Their daughter, however, was taken hostage. When the husband returned home, he was ambushed and forced to reveal his bank account PIN while he begged for their lives. But even after getting what they wanted, the students still murdered both him and his daughter. To cover up their crime, they weighed the bodies down with dumbbells and dumped them into the sea. The case came to light when a human leg was found floating in the water. Investigators quickly pieced together what had happened, and within days, the killers were located. 2 of the students had already fled to China but were arrested there, while the last was caught in Japan. All 3 were sentenced to death. What began as a desperate plan for easy money became an act of shocking cruelty. By the way, if you want to feel the sheer panic and fear of seeing your family being taken away and being powerless to do anything about it, you should watch the movie Nocturnal Animals. You'll guaranteed get that gut-wrenching fear, and it happens pretty early in the movie. On the night of July 30th, 1995, 3 female employees at the NPE supermarket were murdered. Noriko Inagaki, 47, was the first victim. She was shot twice near the store's safe. Investigators believed she was attacked first because she wasn't tied up. The other 2 victims, 17-year-olds Megumi Yabuki and Hiromi Arai, were found bound with adhesive tape and shot in the head at close range. A friend who had come to pick up Noriko discovered their bodies and immediately called the police. At first, authorities thought the crime was a robbery. The 2 younger victims being tied up made it seem like a kidnapping. However, nothing was stolen. The store's safe was untouched, and all valuables remained in place. There were no signs of forced entry, making the motive unclear. That day was the last of a big 4-day sale at the supermarket, and the store had been busy. Witnesses later recalled seeing a suspicious man outside. Around 9 p.m., the store closed, and Noriko locked the doors. A few minutes later, she called her friend to pick her up. At 9:15 p.m., the store's security system was activated, locking the entrance, but shortly after, it was deactivated, and the doors were unlocked again. This suggested that the women were forced back inside at gunpoint. At 9:17 p.m., several people heard loud noises, later confirmed to be gunshots. By 10 p.m., Noriko's friend arrived, but she wasn't outside as planned. When he entered the store with a restaurant owner, they found the gruesome crime scene. Inside the supermarket's office, police found the 3 women dead. Noriko, still in her plain clothes as if ready to leave, was near the safe with burn marks on her skin from the close-range shots. Megumi and Hiromi were tied together with tape and shot execution style in the head. The crime scene was strangely clean. Nothing was disturbed except for a single bullet mark on the safe. Investigators found about 10 footprints from 2 different shoes, as well as traces of iron filings, clay, and moss, suggesting the killer might have worked in metal or construction. The bullets used in the attack came from a Filipino-made Sanders Bingham .38 caliber handgun, a cheap imitation of a Smith & Wesson revolver. Despite using an inaccurate gun, the killer's shots were precise, leading police to suspect a professional assassin or someone with military training. The investigation stalled due to a lack of solid evidence. Over the years, various leads came up but led nowhere. In 2001, a gang member claimed an ex-soldier was responsible, but there was no proof. In 2003, a man arrested for an unrelated robbery had used a similar gun, but he denied involvement. In 2009, a Japanese death row inmate in China pointed to a former gang member from Fujian, China. This suspect was deported from Japan and later moved to Canada. In 2013, Japan successfully extradited him, but he had no useful information and the case stalled again. In 2010, Japan abolished the 15-year statute of limitations for murder, keeping the case open indefinitely. In 2015, police discovered a partial fingerprint on the adhesive tape used to bind the victims. It matched a deceased Japanese man who had worked in transportation and owned a white sedan, like the one seen near the store that night. However, the match was weak, so authorities couldn't conclusively tie him to the crime. In 2018, investigators released new details, hoping to identify a young couple who had shopped at the store before closing. They had bought ingredients for okonomiyaki and left in a white sedan. Police also sought an unknown woman whose cigarette butts were found in the office, as her DNA did not match any employees. The most likely motive was robbery. The MPE supermarket had poor security, and employees openly carried cash to the upstairs safe. Noriko, being the only one with access, might have been forced to open it, but refused. The younger victims were likely restrained to keep them from interfering. However, there were contradictions. Noriko's wallet was untouched, and a paper with the safe's passcode was left in plain sight. The gunman fired at the safe but didn't try to open it. Some believe the murders were a hit job rather than a robbery. The execution-style shootings, the precise aim, and the lack of stolen money suggest the killer had another purpose. Despite decades of investigation, multiple suspects, and international efforts, the case remains unsolved. The NPE supermarket was eventually demolished, leaving only an empty parking lot. In 2015, a shocking case unfolded in Saitama Prefecture when a police sergeant, weighed down by financial troubles stemming from an extramarital affair, crossed the line from law enforcement to violent crime. On September 3rd, the sergeant, whose job included overseeing autopsies, was present at a resident's home following the death of the man's father. While there, he noticed a safe, and instead of simply doing his job, he began meticulously planning a robbery. After studying the resident's schedule and movements, he returned the next day, broke into the house, and used ethanol to subdue the man before strangling him to death. With no struggle or resistance from the victim, the sergeant made off with over 1 million yen in cash, along with valuable coins. His attempt to commit the perfect crime fell apart when DNA evidence placed him at the scene, and multiple eyewitnesses reported seeing his car in the area. Once caught, the sergeant confessed during his trial that he had decided to kill the man because he believed robbing him without resorting to murder would be too difficult. His cold and calculated reasoning sealed his fate, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The Kobe child murders. In 1997, Japan was shaken by a series of brutal killings carried out by someone shockingly young, a 14-year-old boy. The case became infamous after a school janitor discovered the severed head of an 11-year-old boy outside the school gates. Inside the boy's mouth was a chilling note, leading some to believe the killer was trying to imitate the Zodiac killer. The violence started in February 1997, when the boy attacked two young girls on their way home from school, seriously injuring one of them, who was only 10 years old. The attack went mostly unnoticed. In March, he escalated, killing a young girl with a hammer and injuring another. Then, in May, the horror reached its peak. He murdered an 11-year-old boy, beheaded him, and left the severed head at the school gate. The note in the boy's mouth read, "This is the beginning of the game. Try to stop me if you can, you stupid police. I desperately want to see people die. It is a thrill for me to commit murder. A bloody judgment is needed for my years of great bitterness." By June, the killer was caught. When the truth was revealed, it shocked the nation. The killer was only 14 years old. Since he was a minor, he was sent to a juvenile medical training school rather than prison. After serving just 6 years, he was released on parole in 2004. As expected, the families of the victims and the people of Kobe were outraged. Many believed there was no way someone capable of such brutal crimes had been rehabilitated in just 6 years. Even after his conviction, some questioned whether he was the real killer. Some pointed out that the actual murderer was believed to be left-handed, but the convicted boy was right-handed. Another theory suggested the letter found in the victim's mouth was eloquently written, which some believed the boy wasn't capable of. Despite the doubts, he served his sentence and was released. Years later, in 2015, the now-adult killer published an autobiography. The book detailed his crimes in graphic detail and even seemed to express some regret. However, the families of his victims were horrified. They tried to stop the book from being published, but failed. The book became a bestseller in Japan. Then, as if that wasn't shocking enough, the killer created a personal website where he posted photoshopped nudes of himself along with bizarre, unhinged content. His behavior raised serious concerns. In what some saw as retaliation for his publicity and strange behavior, a tabloid decided to reveal his real name, location, and occupation. Despite his identity being made public, nothing happened. He vanished from the public eye, and to this day, no one knows what became of him. Meanwhile, the families of his victims are forced to live with the reminder of his crimes. His book still sits on store shelves, proof of his freedom, while they are left with loss and grief. In 1950, a poisoning case took place at Tokyo University, all because of a messy love life. An assistant professor was on his way to a celebration when he became the target of a deadly plan. The culprit was a dentist with a complicated romantic history, multiple affairs, a troubled marriage, and a reputation he desperately wanted to protect. The assistant professor had been threatening to expose all of his secrets, so the dentist decided to get rid of him. He poisoned a bottle of whiskey with cyanide and gave it to the professor as a gift. The professor drank it, quickly became sick, and died. At first, people thought it was just a heart attack. But one of his closest students wasn't convinced and pushed for a deeper investigation. That's when they found cyanide in the whiskey bottle. The dentist eventually confessed, admitting that he wanted to silence the professor before his affairs were made public. He was sentenced to life in prison, but his sentence was reduced to 15 years, and he only served 8. After being released, he changed his name and opened a new dental practice, starting fresh like nothing ever happened. Japan, like Korea, is very enthusiastic about learning English. This has created a high demand for foreign English teachers, making it a popular place for educators to work. Japan is generally safe and has a low crime rate, but people moving there, especially women, should be aware of cultural differences and safety concerns. One important thing to know is that some Japanese men have a strong interest in foreign white women, which can sometimes lead to uncomfortable or even dangerous situations. A tragic example of this is the case of Tatsuya Ichihashi, a man obsessed with foreign white women, who brutally murdered British English teacher Lindsay Hawker. While this kind of crime is rare, it highlights the importance of staying cautious and aware. Ichihashi is also known for trying to change his appearance by disfiguring his own face to avoid getting caught, making his story even more shocking. While this case does not reflect life in Japan as a whole, it is a reminder that being in a new place always requires caution. Back in 2007, Lindsay Hawker's family and friends started to worry when she suddenly disappeared just days after March 24th. The last time she was seen, she was telling a taxi driver that she would be right back as she arrived at an apartment complex with a man. That same afternoon, her workplace noticed she hadn't shown up, which was strange because she was very responsible and never missed work without informing someone. At first, people thought it might have been a misunderstanding, but when her roommates realized she hadn't come home that night or left a note, they became seriously concerned. They reported her missing to the police, expecting a quick response, but the police didn't seem very interested. Since Lindsay was an adult, they assumed she might have just gone somewhere on her own. Days passed. Saturday turned into Sunday, then Monday, and still there was no word from Lindsay. Her roommates started panicking, especially when she missed work again. Her employers even reached out to her family, but they hadn't heard from her either. Then one of her roommates remembered something disturbing. Lindsay had mentioned a strange man who had been following her home, asking her for English lessons. Her roommate had a bad feeling that this man might be involved in Lindsay's disappearance. Lindsay was born in 1984 in England and was a bright, hard-working student. She studied biology at the University of Leeds and graduated with top honors in 2006. Even though she came from a well-off family and could have continued her studies, she wanted to explore the world on her own. That's why she moved to Japan to work as an English teacher. She worked at the Koiwa School, part of the Nova Teaching Company, and shared an apartment in Chiba with two other female English teachers to help with the high cost of living. Lindsay was dedicated to her job, loved by her students, and well-liked in her neighborhood. Even though she was far from home, she stayed in touch with her family, friends, and boyfriend through emails and video calls. Her encounter with Tatsuya Ichihashi began on March 20th, 2007, after work. As she was heading to her bike, Ichihashi suddenly appeared, claiming to be one of her students. But Lindsay knew he was lying. He was too old and completely unfamiliar. She tried to ignore him, got on her bike, and rode away. But to her shock, Ichihashi started following her, on foot. He kept jogging and running to keep up with her bike. Lindsay pedaled faster, feeling scared, but he didn't stop. When she finally reached her apartment, she felt somewhat relieved, thinking she could scream for help if he tried anything. Out of breath, Ichihashi apologized for following her and insisted he wanted English lessons. It was a strange request. Who chases someone home just to ask for tutoring? Lindsay firmly said no. Inside the apartment, her roommates were surprised to see her with a random man. But Ichihashi wouldn't leave. He claimed he was exhausted from the chase and asked for a glass of water. Maybe feeling sorry for him and knowing her friends were nearby, Lindsay let him in. While inside, Ichihashi again asked for lessons, this time offering to pay her $32 per hour. Lindsay was already earning well, but the extra money was tempting. After thinking about it for a moment, she agreed. Before leaving, Ichihashi gave her a drawing of her face that he had made, which seemed creepy. He also wrote down his name and phone number. Her roommates thought the whole thing was strange, but since the meeting was supposed to happen in a public place, they didn't think it was too risky. Later, Lindsay told her family and boyfriend about this strange encounter, admitting that the man had seemed creepy, but that she had taken the tutoring job for extra savings. After getting permission from her employer to take on a side job, everything seemed set. On March 24th, Lindsay and Ichihashi met at a cafe in Tokyo. CCTV footage showed that Lindsay acted professionally, while Ichihashi seemed to invade her personal space. After the lesson, Lindsay expected to be paid immediately, but Ichihashi said he had forgotten his wallet at home. He suggested they take a taxi to his apartment so she could collect her money. Shockingly, Lindsay agreed, even though he was basically a stranger. When they arrived at his apartment, Lindsay told the taxi driver to wait because she would be right back, but she never came out. After waiting for about 5 minutes, the driver left. That visit to Ichihashi's apartment would be her last. Lindsay's father, Bill Hawker, flew to Japan with her boyfriend Ryan to help with the search. Ryan had an important piece of information. Lindsay had mentioned a stalker to him. Her roommate also still had the piece of paper with Ichihashi's name and number on it. When they gave this to the police, they immediately recognized his name. Ichihashi had a criminal history, including robbery and sexual assault. His wealthy father had previously paid a huge sum of money to one of his victims, allowing him to avoid jail. With this new information, the police feared that Lindsay had met a tragic fate. On March 26, 9 police officers went to Ichihashi's apartment. They saw movement inside and noticed a strange, large plastic bathtub on the balcony. Suspicious, they decided to wait and ambush him. At 7 p.m., Ichihashi suddenly opened the door. He was barefoot and carrying a backpack. When he saw the police, he panicked and ran. Shockingly, even with 9 officers chasing him, he managed to escape. The only thing they recovered was his backpack, which contained gym clothes. Back inside the apartment, they found a horrifying scene. Women's clothes and underwear scattered around, and the bathtub on the balcony filled with sand. Inside, they found Lindsay's body. She was naked, bound, and gagged. Her hair had been shaved off, and her body had bruises. The autopsy revealed she had been strangled so violently that her neck cartilage had broken. She had also been sexually assaulted. Lindsay's body was sent back to England, where a heartbreaking funeral was held. Her parents released doves in her memory, and many people gathered to mourn her. Meanwhile, in Japan, the police were under massive pressure to catch Ichihashi. He disappeared, hiding all over Japan for years. He even lived in an abandoned World War II bunker on a remote island. During this time, he worked in construction to save money for plastic surgery. Desperate to change his face, he even tried to perform surgery on himself, cutting parts of his lips and reshaping his nose. After years on the run, police finally caught him in 2009. In 2011, he was sentenced to life in prison. Even in prison, Ichihashi remained a disturbing figure, writing a book about his time as a fugitive and profiting from it. However, all proceeds were later given to Lindsay's family. Lindsay's murder remains one of Japan's most tragic crimes, serving as a painful reminder to always be cautious, no matter how safe a place may seem. Johnny Kitagawa was one of the most powerful talent agents in Japan, often compared to Hollywood figures known for their influence over the entertainment industry. For decades, he was responsible for launching some of the biggest boy bands in J-pop history, running an agency so successful that it was often called a boy band factory. However, behind the success was a deeply troubling reality that many have since spoken out about. Allegations against Kitagawa date back to the 1960s, with numerous former trainees stating that he took advantage of his authority over young hopefuls. Many aspiring stars believed that working under him was the only way to have a successful career, and some felt pressured to endure mistreatment in silence. His control over the media was so strong that early attempts by individuals to speak out were largely ignored or suppressed. Kitagawa's company was known for its strict rules, closely managing every aspect of its idols' lives. This level of control made it difficult for those affected to come forward, and Japan's cultural attitudes towards shame and reputation only added to the silence surrounding the issue. Many victims kept their experiences to themselves for years, fearing backlash or career ruin. Even after Kitagawa's passing, more individuals have continued to share their stories, finding the courage to speak up. Some former trainees have expressed complicated emotions, acknowledging both the harm they suffered and the career opportunities they were given. Now, if you're too innocent to not have figured it out by now, I can't say much here, but I'll just give a little piece of information. He didn't hurt people at one at a time. He used to switch rooms and go back and forth between different rooms and trainees each night. Personally, I recommend watching a friend's compilation after this to wash your brain. The next case raises serious questions about justice. The Hiratsuka Apartment 5 Bodies case is a disturbing story filled with disappearances, suspicious deaths, and even suspected incest. In 1984, a 6-year-old boy, T, was reported missing. His mother claimed he had been abducted by North Korea, but in 2006, 5 bodies, including T's, were found inside an apartment in Hiratsuka. Among them were Y, 35, and R, 19, who were half-siblings. At first, it was believed they had died in a double suicide and had been in an incestuous relationship. However, investigators later found a note from the mother admitting she had murdered her daughter R. Another note from Y said he wanted to die so he could be with R. The last time R was seen alive was in October 2005, when her social media activity suddenly stopped. Authorities also found troubling text messages where R complained about her mother and talked about wanting freedom. The mother was arrested for murder, and Y's death was ruled a suicide. However, because of the statute of limitations, she was never charged for the deaths of T or the 2 infants. In the end, despite being linked to 5 deaths, she was only sentenced to 17 years in prison. Joji Obara was born in Osaka, Japan, on August 10, 1952, with the birth name Kim Sung-jong. His parents were ethnic Koreans living in Japan. His father started from humble beginnings collecting scraps, but eventually became very wealthy, owning several properties. The family reportedly ran a taxi company, owned real estate, and even had a pachinko business. Growing up in a privileged environment, Obara attended elite private schools in Tokyo and Yokohama, including Takushoku Senior High School in Kanagawa. He was known to be a quiet and shy student. He and his siblings were seen as wealthy, sheltered kids. However, his father passed away when he was just 17, leaving them a massive inheritance. Some reports suggest their father left them around 40 million yen in assets across Tokyo and Osaka, making them millionaires at a young age. Obara then enrolled in a prep school that guaranteed admission into Gakushuin University through an affiliation program. He later graduated with a degree in law and politics. After university, he became a naturalized Japanese citizen and changed his name to Joji Obara. He pursued a career in real estate, while his 2 brothers became doctors. Finding his job dull and tiring, Obara turned to aggressive investments in real estate and the stock market in his 30s. However, the economic recession of the 1990s hit hard, crashing stock and real estate prices in Japan. Obara lost his business and most of his wealth, and creditors came after him for his debts. With his fortune nearly gone, he turned to crime to sustain himself. He started laundering money for the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza, specifically the Sumiyoshi Kai group. Beyond financial crimes, Obara's behavior became more sinister. He kept his private life hidden, staying mostly indoors at his residence in Moto Akasaka Tower. He even banned his former employees from taking pictures of him. He was known to wear sunglasses during the day and had a nocturnal lifestyle, as revealed by his phone records. Despite losing much of his wealth, he still owned multiple luxury cars and flaunted his money. However, Obara also had a dark and disturbing obsession with women. Like many wealthy men, he frequently visited Japanese hostess bars. Hosts and hostesses are paid to serve drinks and keep customers company, without any sexual services included. Some also accept paid dates outside their clubs, known as dohan dates. While these jobs can be glamorous, they are also risky. Obara was a regular at Casablanca Club, a high-end nightclub in the Roppongi district, where he targeted women, especially foreign hostesses. He had a particular interest in blonde Caucasian women and was known to have a fetish for unconscious victims. He would invite hostesses on dohan dates, but instead of just taking them out, he drugged them and carried out horrific assaults while they were unconscious. He would take victims to his properties, like his condo in Zushi Marina or Moto Akasaka Tower, where he used chloroform-soaked cloths to keep them unconscious. Some reports suggest he used a rope attached to a metal bolt in his ceiling to restrain his victims. Even worse, he recorded himself committing these crimes and labeled the tapes with the victims' names. When the victims woke up, they often experienced nausea and pain, both physically and psychologically. He would sometimes dress them back in their clothes and lie, saying things like, "You drank an entire bottle of vodka," or claiming there had been a gas leak. In 1998, Obara was arrested in Wakayama for disguising himself as a woman to enter women's restrooms and film them. He refused to cooperate with authorities and declined to have his mugshot taken. However, despite his predatory actions, he remained under the radar for a long time. That changed with the disappearance of Lucy Jane Blackman. Lucy Blackman was a 21-year-old British woman who had worked as a flight attendant for British Airways. When her visa in Tokyo was extended, she decided to work as a hostess at Casablanca Club in Roppongi alongside her friend Louise Phillips. On July 1, 2000, Lucy went on a Dohan date with a man but never returned or contacted anyone. Lucy had been offered a prepaid phone and an invitation to a beachside restaurant. She left her apartment wearing a black dress and a silver heart necklace, planning to meet Louise and their friend Scott Fraser later that evening. She made a few calls to Louise that day, but after 7 p.m., she was never heard from again. The next day, Louise received a phone call from an unknown man who claimed Lucy had joined a cult and would not be coming back. This alarming message set off a widespread search. Lucy's father, Tim Blackman, and her sister Sophie flew to Japan to find her. At first, the Japanese police did not take Lucy's disappearance seriously. They suspected she might have overstayed her visa or disappeared intentionally. Many foreign women working in hostess clubs suddenly quit and left without notice, so the authorities believed Lucy had done the same. Out of the 300,000 legal foreign workers in Japan, 1/3 were in the adult industry, and the police assumed Lucy had fallen into trouble there. However, Tim Blackman refused to accept this and pushed the police to investigate properly. Even British Prime Minister Tony Blair got involved, urging Japan's Prime Minister Yoshiro Mori to make finding Lucy a priority. A breakthrough came when another hostess reported a suspicious encounter. She said she had gone on a Dohan date with a man who took her to a seaside area with palm trees. She lost consciousness during the date and woke up feeling unwell. The police realized the only place in the region with palm trees was Zushi Marina in Kanagawa. Investigators visited Roppongi and spoke to other hostesses, who were initially scared to talk due to visa concerns. However, several women eventually came forward, describing eerily similar experiences. Going on a Dohan date near the sea, blacking out, and waking up the next morning with no memory. 5 days after Lucy's disappearance, on July 6, 2000, the police received a tip from a property manager about a noisy tenant the previous day, Joji Obara. Officers visited his apartment and found him sweaty and shirtless. Inside, they noticed chunks of cement and gardening tools. When they asked to check the bathroom, he refused, acting agitated. However, there was not enough evidence to arrest him yet. Investigators then looked into residents at Zushi Marina who owned luxury cars. Obara's name stood out, especially when they realized he had used a fake name, P. Ohara, which in Japanese kanji could be read as Obara. With criminal records and victim testimonies matching his profile, police arrested him at 7 a.m. on October 18, 2000. Obara did not resist, as if he knew his time was up. After his arrest, police searched his properties and found evidence: alcohol, drugs, a personal notebook, and hundreds of videotapes documenting his assaults. Watching these tapes was horrifying for investigators, but none contained footage of Lucy. Despite overwhelming evidence, Obara denied all allegations, claiming that the women had consented because they were paid. He also denied knowing Lucy Blackman. The search for Lucy ended tragically on February 9, 2001, when Inspector Tadashi Naito discovered her remains. Her body had been dismembered into 8 parts and buried under sand, with her head encased in concrete. She was found in a seaside cave in Miura, Kanagawa, near one of Obara's properties. Unfortunately, Lucy was not Obara's first victim. Before her, another foreign hostess, Karita Ridgway from Australia, had gone on a Dohan date with him. However, he used too much chloroform, causing her to suffer seizures and eventually die. Hiroaki Hidaka's life started off pretty normal. He did well in school, but didn't have any clear goals or ambitions. Over time, he drifted into bad habits: gambling, drinking, and addiction, things he kept hidden because he wasn't proud of them. Eventually, he became a taxi driver. It seemed like he was getting his life together, but in reality, he resented the businessmen and professionals he drove around. He felt like he was better than them, yet they had money and success while he was drowning in debt. Then he got married and started a family. But instead of being a fresh start, things took another dark turn. His wife suffered from severe postpartum depression and decided to take their baby and stay with her family until she felt better. This left Hidaka feeling abandoned and depressed, and instead of trying to fix his life, he spiraled deeper into his vices. Desperate for money, but unwilling to work for it, he turned to a sugar daddy website, where older men pay younger women for dates. But Hidaka was broke. The first woman he met had to cut their date short, saying she needed to pay a 100,000 yen bill. That gave him an idea. He assumed she had the money on her, and since he owed 150,000 yen in debt, he figured if he killed her, he could take the cash and almost pay off what he owed. So he murdered her. But there was a problem. She didn't have the money he expected. All she had was 50,000 yen, which meant she barely had anything beyond what he had already given her. His plan had failed, but instead of stopping, he kept going. At some point, his wife found out about his massive debts and filed for divorce. That didn't stop him either. He kept using the website to lure in women, killing them in the same way, figuring he would eventually get caught and executed anyway. He had no concern for his victims or the lives he was destroying. What finally led to his arrest wasn't the website. It was his own arrogance. He decided to target a friend of a friend, someone he knew had money. But unlike the other victims, this woman realized what was happening and fought back. She still didn't survive, but her disappearance could be traced back to him. When she was reported missing, the police linked Hidaka to the crime, and he was arrested. He was convicted of murdering 4 women and sentenced to death. In Japan, crimes against women are often ignored. A BBC documentary revealed that gender-based crimes are widespread, but victims hesitate to report them out of fear of shame. Many still believe sexual assault is not real, and this idea is strong in Japan as well as in other Asian countries. Making things worse, certain types of adult videos even glorify these crimes, which makes it harder for victims to seek justice. Sexual assault can happen anywhere, from private homes to public places like the subway. A common crime in Japan is chikan, where men take advantage of crowded trains to grope women. This sets the stage for the case we're going to discuss today, the horrifying story of a Japanese university club that was secretly created to target female students. This is the Super Free Incident. Universities in Japan have various clubs, ranging from hobby-based groups to extracurricular activities. But shockingly, some clubs have existed for the purpose of sexual assault. At first, it may seem impossible that people would willingly join such clubs. But in reality, these groups exist, hidden from universities and the public. Of course, they don't openly advertise their crimes. They disguise themselves as normal social gatherings while secretly targeting female members or even random women. Since victims often stay silent, these clubs are difficult to uncover. One of the most well-known cases of this type was the Super Free Club. Super Free was originally a social club at Waseda University, an elite school in Japan. The university is known for producing politicians and business leaders, but its prestigious image was tainted by this scandal. The exact moment when Super Free changed from a social club into a criminal group is unclear. However, things took a dark turn when a student named Shinichiro Wada became the club's leader in 1995. Wada originally wanted to attend the University of Tokyo, Japan's most prestigious school. However, after failing to get in, he set his sights on Waseda University and was accepted. Once at Waseda, he joined Super Free. The club had a reputation for throwing wild parties with lots of women. Wada quickly became a popular figure within the group and eventually took control. Under his leadership, Super Free expanded beyond Waseda, recruiting members from other elite universities in Tokyo. Super Free's main activities included hosting large parties, particularly in the Roppongi district, a popular nightlife area. But behind the scenes, these events were a cover for their crimes. To keep their illegal activities hidden, Wada instructed members to sell party tickets only to trusted people and new university students. From the outside, Super Free seemed like just another university club. But in reality, it was highly organized, with multiple branches, employees, and even an office in Tokyo. Reports suggest that WADA earned about 10 million yen, $100,000 a year from these events. But money wasn't their main goal. Women were. Super Free specifically targeted young women, especially those from smaller universities. These women believed that attending these parties would introduce them to Tokyo's high-class lifestyle. However, the reality was far more sinister. Super Free members had a set routine. First, they held large rave parties where guests drank heavily. They encouraged certain women to drink until they were completely intoxicated. Then, they took these women to bathrooms or other secluded areas where multiple men would assault them in turns. The club functioned like a pyramid scheme, where members were expected to participate in assaults to prove their loyalty. WADA himself promoted these attacks, saying that those who refused weren't true members of the group. The assaults didn't just happen in club bathrooms. Victims were sometimes taken to alleyways, stairwells, hotels, or even members' homes. The perpetrators spiked drinks with strong alcohol, sometimes up to 90% alcohol content, or drugs to knock victims unconscious. To prevent women from reporting, members took photos of the assaults as blackmail. One member, Kishimoto, was responsible for keeping victims quiet, ensuring they didn't resist or seek help. Because of these tactics, Super Free operated for years without being caught. It is estimated that around 100 women were assaulted by Super Free members, and about 50 men participated. Some offenders admitted to attacking women 15 times, while others claimed they only did it once or twice. However, the true scale of their crimes is unknown. The case finally came to light due to 3 specific incidents. December 19, 2001, WADA and 2 other members assaulted a 19-year-old college student at his residence. April 2003, WADA and 12 members assaulted an 18-year-old near a Roppongi club before taking her to his home for further abuse. May 18, 2003, WADA and 4 members attacked a 20-year-old college student at the same Roppongi location. Despite there being over 100 victims, only WADA and 13 other members were arrested, and only these 3 cases were officially prosecuted. Many victims refused to file formal complaints, possibly fearing retaliation or blackmail. WADA was sentenced to 14 years in prison, while the other members received sentences ranging from 28 months to 10 years. However, WADA's sentence was reduced because his father offered financial compensation to the victims, though only to those involved in the 3 officially reported cases. Even after being convicted, some members had the audacity to appeal their sentences. WADA's appeal was denied by the Tokyo High Court in 2005, and later, Japan's Supreme Court also rejected it. Despite being sentenced to 14 years, WADA was released early on parole in 2017. He changed his name and now lives in Osaka. This case led to changes in Japan's sexual assault laws, including the introduction of a gang sexual assault charge. Before the revisions, the minimum sentence for robbery was 5 years, but for sexual assault, it was only 2. This highlighted how the legal system valued property more than human dignity. Shockingly, some officials made disgusting comments about the case. In 2003, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yasuo Fukuda said that some women act like they want to be assaulted. When criticized, he later claimed his words were misunderstood. Additionally, Japan has a long history of problematic media representations of sexual violence. For example, in the 1990s, an anime called Rape Man featured a superhero who assaulted women as a form of justice. This anime was widely consumed and still has fans today. Some experts believe that Japan's defeat in World War II left many men feeling powerless, leading them to seek control through such media. While this is only one perspective, it highlights deeper issues in how some parts of Japanese society view women. Sachiko Eto seemed like an ordinary woman living in Fukushima. Her early life was tough. Her father died when she was young, leaving her to fend for herself. Still, she pushed through, got a job, fell in love, got married, and had kids. It seemed like she had built a stable life. But things took a turn. Her husband was injured in an accident and developed severe back pain. On top of that, he had gambling debts. Then their daughter got sick. Struggling to cope, they turned to a religious group that claimed prayer could heal illnesses. To their surprise, her husband's pain disappeared. But not long after, so did he. He had an affair with another member of the group and left. Now abandoned and stuck with a mortgage, Eto prayed for her husband to return. But during one of her prayers, she felt something strange, a supernatural experience, or so she believed. Convinced she had a spiritual awakening, she decided to start her own cult. She began reaching out to people from her past, offering them guidance and emotional healing. In reality, she was just listening to their problems like a therapist, but to her followers, she seemed to have a special gift. Soon, she had loyal believers who lived with her and treated her like a savior. At first, the commune was peaceful, but as Eto gained more power, things took a dark turn. She met a new man in the cult, fell in love, and together they started enforcing strict rules. They controlled food, sleep, and even bathroom use, all under the guise of purification. Those who spoke out were punished. She called it an exorcism, her way of driving out evil spirits. Over time, the abuse escalated. 2 followers died from the brutal treatment, but Eto told the others that God had taken their souls. Then more people started dying. The exorcisms included chanting and beating followers with drumsticks, supposedly to purify their spirits by destroying their dirty bodies. In reality, it was pure torture. As more followers died, the cult became a house of horrors. Eventually, police raided the compound, ending Eto's reign. She was arrested, convicted of 6 murders, and sentenced to death, one of the few women in Japan's history to receive the death penalty. The case revolves around customers of a dog shop who went missing and were later found to have been murdered. The killers burned the victims' belongings and dismembered their bodies, making it difficult to find any remains. At first, the cases were unsolved due to a lack of evidence, but a similar incident in Osaka led to a breakthrough. On April 21, 1993, a man named Akio Kawasaki went missing in Saitama Prefecture. His family reported him missing after he failed to return home. Investigators discovered that he had last visited a pet shop called Africa Kennel in Kumagaya before disappearing. The shop was run by a couple named Gen Sekine and Hiroko Kazama. Kawasaki had gone there to complain because the couple had sold him an ordinary old dog disguised as a rare Rhodesian Ridgeback for a large sum of money. His car was later found near a train station, but he was nowhere to be seen. As police investigated, they found that 2 Yakuza gang members and a woman who also had connections to the couple had gone missing after visiting the pet shop. However, due to a lack of evidence, the investigation stalled. Then, in 1995, another case in Osaka, known as the Dog Lover Murder case, raised suspicions about whether it was connected to the 4 missing dog lovers in Saitama. Reporters began investigating the Saitama case again, which led to renewed interest in the couple. Sekine was already known to authorities. He liked to brag about crimes, saying that if murder were an Olympic sport, he would win a gold medal. He once told a Yakuza acquaintance that he had killed 30 people and often shared venison with him, even though he had never hunted. Some police officers suspected that Sekine had actually been feeding human flesh to the Yakuza to get rid of evidence. Despite strong suspicions, there was no concrete proof, until an accomplice came forward and confessed. This confession revealed shocking details about the case. Sekine and Kazama had been well-known breeders of Alaskan Malamutes in the 1980s. However, after Japan's economic downturn, their business suffered, and they fell into debt after expanding their shop. To stay afloat, they began scamming customers by selling common dogs disguised as rare breeds at high prices. Kawasaki, who ran an industrial waste disposal business with his brother, became one of their victims. Sekine convinced him to buy 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks for 11 million yen, about $81,000 USDs, claiming their puppies could be sold for a fortune. Later, Kawasaki learned from an acquaintance that he had been scammed. The dogs were worth no more than $760 each, and the male dog was too old to breed. Furious, he demanded a refund, even threatening legal action. Sekine and Kazama decided they couldn't give him his money back, so they planned to kill him. On April 20, 1993, They lured Kawasaki into a garage, pretending they would return his money. They gave him a capsule, claiming it was a nutritional supplement, but it actually contained poison they had obtained from a veterinarian. Kawasaki took it willingly and died. The couple wasn't alone in the garage that night. Their employee, Yamazaki, who worked as Kazama's driver, was there. He had left briefly to run an errand, and when he returned, he found Kawasaki dead. Sakine threatened him, even asking about his children's well-being to intimidate him into helping. Yamazaki, fearing for his life, agreed to help dispose of the body. He let the couple use his bathroom to dismember Kawasaki's corpse, then helped transport and dispose of the remains. A few months later, Yakuza member Yasutoshi Endo, who had previously helped Sakine with customer disputes, grew suspicious of Kawasaki's disappearance. Endo and his driver, Susumu Wakui, started asking questions and pressuring Sakine. This made them targets. On July 21, 1993, Sakine and Kazama invited them over, saying they would give them property documents as payment. Instead, they tricked them into taking the same poisoned capsule that had killed Kawasaki. Endo died quickly, but Wakui remained conscious for a while. Sakine panicked and lured him outside, pretending to call an ambulance. The poison eventually took effect, and Wakui died. Their bodies were also dismembered and burned. One more victim was yet to come. On August 26, 1993, Sakine targeted Chizuko Sakiguchi, the mother of a former employee. He convinced her to invest in the shop, then poisoned her too. This time, Sakine acted alone. In January 1994, police arrested a suspect in Osaka for a similar dog-related murder case. This reignited media interest in the Saitama case. Reporters flooded Africa Kennel, putting Sakine and Kazama under intense scrutiny. They denied everything. Meanwhile, Yamazaki was struggling with guilt. He made excuses to police but then suddenly disappeared with his wife. Authorities later found out that his wife had committed fraud, embezzling $384,000. Eventually, on December 3, 1994, Yamazaki confessed to everything and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Thanks to his testimony, investigators were able to locate the victims' remains, leading to Sakine and Kazama's arrest on January 5, 1995. However, there were rumors of other victims. At least 3 people connected to Sakine had vanished in 1984, and police received multiple tips about suspicious deaths. During the trial, Sakine and Kazama turned on each other, each blaming the other as the mastermind. But the judge ruled that they had acted together. Both were sentenced to death. They appealed multiple times, but their sentences were upheld, with the final ruling on June 5, 2009. Meanwhile, Yamazaki, who had been forced into helping, received a 3-year prison sentence. He was released in August 1998. Sakine never admitted to his crimes. He remained fascinated by his ability to dispose of bodies. He had destroyed evidence in grotesque ways, cutting the corpses into small pieces, feeding them to fish, and burning everything else. He even bragged about his perfect crimes. However, karma eventually caught up with him. His health declined in prison, and he died on March 27, 2017. Kazama remains in prison at the Tokyo detention house. Recently, this case resurfaced after a Buddhist monk shared a chilling experience with Sakine. As a university student, the monk, Miki, had visited Africa Kennel with friends. Sakine had offered him an easy job, walking dogs for a high salary. Miki was tempted but ultimately refused. Each time he visited, Sakine offered him a can of coffee, which he drank twice. On his 3rd visit, he declined. Years later, after Sakine's arrest, Miki learned that the suspect had been offering poisoned drinks to his victims. It was then that he realized how close he had come to death. Hiroshi had a disturbing condition known as paraphilic psychosexual disorder. In simple terms, he could only feel pleasure through acts that most people would consider deeply abnormal. For him, that meant strangling people, not just lightly, but to the point of death. His life quickly spiraled downward. He dropped out of university, then got fired from jobs. But instead of stopping, he kept going. Mo eventually turned to the internet, where he found a suicide club, an online space where people struggling with suicidal thoughts gathered to talk. He used this as a hunting ground, pretending to be a kindred spirit looking for a peaceful group suicide. In reality, he had no intention of letting anyone take their own life. Instead, he lured 3 people: a 14-year-old boy, a 25-year-old woman, and a 21-year-old man, by promising a painless death together using carbon monoxide in a car. But once they met up, he turned on them, strangling each of them to death after only a short conversation. After his arrest, Mo openly admitted that killing gave him pleasure. He even blamed his urges on reading mystery novels as a child. Dubbed the Lust Murderer, he was sentenced to death. His execution was carried out in 2009. Takahiro Shiraishi seemed like just another quiet guy, introverted, bouncing from job to job, never drawing much attention. But his loneliness ran deep. He eventually got involved in Tokyo's red light district, tangled up in shady business, and his reputation took a nosedive. Some people might try to rebuild their lives, but Shiraishi had other ideas. He turned to Twitter. And not just any part of Twitter, the darkest corners where people at their lowest searched for an escape. He posed as someone who understood them, someone who would help them log off from life peacefully. But he had his own twisted plan. His first victim believed he would help her end her suffering. Instead, he drugged, assaulted, and strangled her. Then, using instructions he found online, he dismembered her body. Later, when he ran into her boyfriend, he panicked, thinking he had been tracked. So he invited the boyfriend over and murdered him the same way. Over 2 months, he lured in 7 more women, promising them peace but delivering horror. He drugged, assaulted, and killed them, stealing their money afterward. Police got involved when multiple women went missing. Investigators followed an online lead about a man contacting women and eventually traced it back to Shiraishi. When they searched his apartment, they found a nightmare: bones, organs, and the severed heads of all 9 victims, stored in coolers and preserved with cat litter. In 2017, Shiraishi was arrested, put on trial, and sentenced to death. He remains on death row, awaiting execution. Getting married and raising a family is a huge responsibility. Couples have to take on the roles of both parents and partners, setting a good example for their children. However, the man in today's story did the opposite. His actions showed that he had no morals and was willing to do anything to get what he wanted. This case is about a man who appeared to be a responsible father and husband, but was actually hiding a dark and ruthless nature. On November 3, 1994, in Yokohama, Japan, a mysterious white plastic bag was found floating in the harbor. It was large, heavy, and tied to a rock to weigh it down. Residents nearby reported the sighting, and the Japanese Coast Guard arrived. When they opened the bag, they made a horrifying discovery: the body of a woman. Over the next 8 days, divers found 2 more plastic bags in the same harbor. Inside, they found the remains of 2 small children, both under the age of 2. It was clear all 3 victims were connected, likely murdered by the same person. Investigators identified the first victim as 31-year-old Aiko, a resident of Tsukuba, a city north of Tokyo. The 2 children were her 2-year-old daughter and her infant son. The prime suspect was obvious: Aiko's husband, 29-year-old Dr. Iwao Nomoto. Just days before, Dr. Nomoto had filed a missing persons report for Aiko and their children. When he was called in for questioning, he appeared shocked by the news. However, detectives noticed something suspicious. He had fresh scratches and cuts on his wrist. When asked about them, he claimed a dog had scratched him. Investigators doubted his story but had no concrete proof that he was responsible. The triple murder shocked the nation. As the media covered the case, details about Aiko's personal life surfaced. Rumors spread that she had worked in nightlife and had expensive taste. Some began to paint her as a bad wife and mother. Then police found Aiko's diary, which revealed she had been trapped in a troubled marriage. The diary showed that the real problem was Dr. Nomoto's infidelity. He had cheated on Aiko repeatedly, giving him a strong motive to kill his wife and children. When confronted with this evidence, Dr. Nomoto denied everything. But soon, police found CCTV footage of his car near the harbor where the bodies were discovered. On November 25th, 3 weeks after the first body was found, he finally confessed. Iwao Nomoto grew up in Ibaraki Prefecture and excelled in school. He became a doctor and made his family proud. He met Aiko at a tennis club in 1990 when he was a 25-year-old intern and she was a 27-year-old nurse. At the time, he was already dating someone else, but quickly fell for Aiko. They moved in together, and Aiko soon became pregnant. Despite this, he continued seeing his previous girlfriend, only ending things when he was forced to marry Aiko due to the pregnancy. Even after getting a high-paying hospital job, Nomoto struggled financially. He had made risky investments, buying 3 properties in Kobe and Osaka, leading to massive debt. Aiko, determined to help, took on extra jobs, working as a nurse during the day and as a karaoke hostess at night. She made sacrifices to support their family, but then she discovered the real reason behind their money problems: her husband's affairs. Nomoto had been cheating on her with multiple nurses at his hospital. He even gave one mistress a key to his apartment, and he had bought properties as gifts for his lovers. When Aiko found out, she was devastated. She had worked so hard for nothing. Enraged, she demanded a divorce, asking for a $1 million settlement and $10,000 per month in child support. Nomoto begged her to stay, promising to change, and she gave him another chance. But he didn't stop. Even after their second child was born, he continued to have affairs. Aiko, not wanting to break up the family, made a shocking compromise. She allowed him to see other women as long as he stayed home at night, spent weekends with the family, and treated her with the same love as his mistresses. But even this wasn't enough for Nomoto. Aiko's patience finally ran out, and she stopped helping him pay his debts. She started spending her money only on her children and herself. On October 29th, after yet another argument over his cheating, Aiko grabbed a knife and wrapped a rope around her own neck, threatening to take her own life. She told Nomoto she would expose his affairs to everyone at his hospital. Fearing his career would be ruined, he panicked. Instead of calming her down, he grabbed the rope and pulled as hard as he could. Aiko tried to fight back, but he covered her nose and mouth until she stopped breathing. Then he turned to their children. He later claimed he didn't want them to grow up knowing their father was a killer, so he took their lives too. After killing his family, Nomoto went to work as if nothing had happened. That night, he stuffed their bodies into plastic bags, placed them in his car, and drove off. But before dumping them, he stopped at a strip club and a brothel, as if celebrating. Only after that did he drive to the harbor, weigh the bodies down with rocks, and throw them into the sea. The next day, he acted normal, even planning a trip to Hokkaido with a mistress. To cover his tracks, he filed a missing persons report for Aiko and the children, believing their bodies would never be found. But his plan failed when the bodies surfaced. During his trial, Nomoto claimed the murders were spontaneous. However, evidence suggested otherwise. A forensic report found a piece of undigested chocolate in his infant son's stomach. Since chocolate melts quickly in the stomach, this suggested the child had eaten it just an hour before his death. But Nomoto had claimed he killed his children right after Aiko, which didn't match the timeline. A friend of Aiko's also testified that she saw the baby eating chocolate at 7:30 p.m. on October 28th, the night before the murders. This raised doubts about Nomoto's version of events. Did he kill them at a different time? Had he planned the murders in advance? Ultimately, Dr. Iwao Nomoto was found guilty of the murders. Fusako Sano, a 9-year-old who disappeared mysteriously. One moment she was a regular kid enjoying a school game, and the next she was gone. Days turned into months, then years, and her disappearance became a haunting mystery. Shockingly, Fusako was held captive for 9 years by her kidnapper in his apartment. During this time, she was confined, isolated, and subjected to mistreatment. Sanjo, located in Niigata Prefecture, was a small and quiet town surrounded by mountains. Fusako grew up here with her loving parents enjoying a happy childhood. Given the town's size, no one expected a tragic event like this to happen. On November 13, 1990, Fusako watched a baseball game at school and was walking home alone when a man stopped his car beside her. He pulled out a 19-centimeter knife and threatened her, demanding she get in. Frightened and powerless, Fusako complied. She was never seen again for years. Her kidnapper was Nobuyuki Sato, born in July 1962. He was 28 at the time. Not much is known about his early life. but he was an only child with a distant relationship with his elderly father and a close bond with his overly indulgent mother. She spoiled him, which likely influenced his later behavior. He eventually placed his father in a care facility where he passed away. Nobuyuki worked in the automobile industry, but his exact role is unclear. He had impulsive behavior and an extreme obsession with cleanliness, possibly indicating OCD. A notable incident at work occurred when he got spider webs on himself, causing him to panic excessively, clean, and quit his job. He then lived with his mother, unemployed and financially dependent on her. Despite relying on her, he was abusive toward her, yelling and even using a stun gun on her multiple times. Shockingly, his mother never reported him to the police, allowing his behavior to continue. There are reports she sought help from the health department, but no action was taken. A year before abducting Fusako, Nobuyuki had tried to kidnap another child, but was caught. He was only sentenced to 1 year in jail. This light punishment allowed him to continue his crimes. After kidnapping Fusako, he brought her to his house using the back door to avoid being seen. He locked her in his upstairs room, beginning her 9-year nightmare. Her parents reported her missing immediately, and police conducted extensive searches. They used ground and aerial searches and distributed missing posters. However, efforts faded, and by December, the search had nearly stopped. A conspiracy theory soon emerged suggesting North Korean agents had abducted her, as many such kidnappings had occurred in Japan. This false belief took attention away from the real case. In reality, she was only 55 kilometers away in Kashiwazaki, shockingly close to a police station. Despite many kidnapping cases ending in tragedy, Nobuyuki did not intend to kill Fusako. Reports state he never sexually assaulted her, claiming he saw her as family. However, his treatment was still horrific. She was never allowed to leave, not even for the bathroom, instead forced to use plastic bags. Bathing was rare only when he decided it was necessary. He regularly abused her, physically assaulting her, and using a stun gun, especially when angry or if she forgot to record horse races for him. Over time, the stun gun attacks became so frequent that she grew used to the pain. Reports on her food intake vary. Some say she ate 3 meals a day, while others claim she only got 1. Either way, she was severely malnourished, weak, and suffered from poor health due to the lack of sunlight and proper nutrition. She had to wear his clothes, as he feared buying her new ones might raise suspicion. She never attempted to escape. Threatened, overpowered, and growing hopeless, she accepted her fate, holding on to the hope that her ordeal would end. With no access to TV and only a radio, her isolation was extreme. It seems unlikely that Nobuyuki's mother was unaware of her presence. There were strange noises. He spent all his time in his room, and he reacted aggressively when she tried to go upstairs. Police later found feminine products in the house, raising further suspicion. It remains unclear whether she knowingly helped or simply turned a blind eye. Nobuyuki's abusive behavior eventually led to his downfall. His mother had previously reached out for help, but was ignored. On January 12, 2000, she contacted the health department again. Officials visited on January 28th. Nobuyuki panicked when they arrived, as they insisted on checking the second floor. When they went upstairs, they found Fusako curled up in a blanket, frail and malnourished. At first, she hesitated to leave, asking if she could stay, but the officials reassured her that she was safe, and she finally left with them. Nobuyuki was hospitalized at first and treated as a mental health patient, but once police confirmed Fusako's identity, he was arrested in February. Meanwhile, Fusako was reunited with her parents. Though overjoyed, they had to readjust to having their daughter back after nearly a decade. Nobuyuki's trial moved quickly. His defense argued he was mentally unfit, but psychiatric evaluations ruled otherwise. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison on January 22, 2002. He appealed twice, with one appeal reducing his sentence by 3 years. However, the final ruling upheld the full term. He was released in 2015 and later died alone in his 50s. Fusako's experience left deep scars. While her physical health improved, her mental recovery took longer. Rescuers noted that at 19, she still had the mindset of a 9-year-old. She became timid but worked hard to adjust to normal life. Fortunately, she had a strong support system of family, friends, and neighbors. Now older Fusako has found peace working in the rice fields with her family and still enjoys sports, a passion she carried from childhood. Though the trauma remains, she has slowly reclaimed her life. This next case is both confusing and frustrating. Even after more than a decade, there are still more questions than answers. The police worked hard to solve it, but it felt like they were stuck in a never-ending puzzle with no way to reach the truth. This case has also caused tension between Japan and Korea, because many in Japan believe the suspect was Korean. This is the tragic and mysterious murder of the Miyazawa family, also known as the Setagaya family. On the morning of December 31st, 2000, an elderly woman named Haruko went to visit her daughter's family in the Setagaya neighborhood of Tokyo. She had been trying to call them all morning, but no one answered. She thought they might be busy getting ready for New Year's, so she decided to check on them herself. Since she lived nearby, it was easy for her to get there. Haruko arrived at the house around 10 a.m. and rang the doorbell. She heard it chime, but no one came to the door. She pressed it again, still nothing. Growing worried, she tried the door and found it unlocked. She stepped inside, calling out for her daughter and grandchildren, but there was only silence. Then she saw something no mother should ever have to see. Lying on the floor near the stairs was the lifeless body of her son-in-law, Mikio Miyazawa. As she walked further inside, she found the bodies of her daughter, Yasuko Miyazawa, and her two grandchildren, Nina and Rei. Shocked and horrified, Haruko ran outside, screaming for help. Neighbors quickly called the police. The Miyazawas were a happy and peaceful family of four. Mikio, 44, worked from home for a marketing company called Interbrand, where he helped businesses develop their brands. His wife, Yasuko, 41, was a respected teacher, well-liked by her students, colleagues, and parents. Their children were 6-year-old Rei and 8-year-old Nina. Rei had a speech delay and was receiving special treatment for it. Because of this, Yasuko was hesitant about moving, even though the family had planned to leave their neighborhood. When they first moved to Setagaya in 1991, the area was full of houses. But over time, the local government started buying the land to turn it into a park. By the year 2000, only 4 houses remained, including the Miyazawa family's home. When the police arrived, they found the house in complete disarray. The living room sofa looked like someone had slept on it. Papers were scattered everywhere, and in the bathroom, a drawer and its contents were dumped into the bathtub. There were food wrappers, ice cream cups, and bloody bandages in the trash. The toilet was used but not flushed. At first, police thought it was a robbery, but that idea was quickly ruled out. Strangely, nothing valuable was missing, except for Mikio's jacket and Yasuko's handbag. Oddly enough, the suspect left an entire outfit on the living room sofa. A black jacket from Uniqlo, gloves, a bucket hat, a long-sleeved shirt, a muffler, a fanny pack, and a pair of Slazenger sneakers. Some of these items smelled like Drakkar Noir, a popular men's cologne at the time. Investigators also found handkerchiefs, which they believed the killer used to wipe off the weapons. Based on the evidence, police were able to piece together what happened. The attacker climbed onto the second floor, removed the metal railing from the bathroom window, and entered the house. The first person he saw was Rei, who was sleeping in his room next to the bathroom. Without hesitation, the killer strangled the boy. Rei fought back, but he was too small to resist. Hearing noises upstairs, Mikio went to check. As he reached the top of the stairs, he was suddenly attacked with a sashimi knife. He was stabbed multiple times, including in the head, where a piece of the knife blade broke off inside his skull. The noise woke Yasuko and Nina, who were sleeping on the 3rd floor. The killer then went upstairs and attacked them too. At some point, the knife he was using broke. He left briefly to grab another knife from the family's kitchen. During this moment, Yasuko, despite being badly injured, tried to escape with Nina. She carried her daughter down the stairs, hoping to find safety. But the killer hadn't left. Armed with the second knife, he resumed his attack. Both Yasuko and Nina suffered multiple stab wounds, mostly to their faces and heads. Yasuko had defensive wounds, showing that she fought back as hard as she could, but in the end, both she and Nina were killed. After murdering the family, the killer didn't leave right away. Instead, he stayed in the house for hours, possibly as long as 10 hours. He acted as if he had no fear of being caught. He ate ice cream and melon from the fridge, drank barley tea, and used Mikio's computer to browse the internet. He even attempted to buy theater tickets with Mikio's credit card, but failed because he didn't have the right details. Shockingly, he even took a nap on the living room sofa, just steps away from Mikio's body. By the time he left, he had left behind a mountain of evidence: fingerprints, DNA, footprints, clothing, and even his own waste in the toilet. It seemed like an open and shut case. But even with all this evidence, police couldn't find him. Frustration grew and theories spread. One of the most popular theories was that the murderer was Korean. The first reason was his shoes. The suspect's footprints showed he was wearing size 28 centimeter, about US size 10, Schlesinger sneakers. Some reports claimed this size was only available in South Korea, not Japan. The bag he left behind was also said to be made in Korea. Later, this was proven false. Both the shoes and bag were also sold in Japan. But the rumor had already spread. The theory gained more attention in 2005 when police released DNA results. The killer's DNA showed that his father was of Asian descent, while his mother had European ancestry. The paternal DNA was found more often in Koreans than in Japanese people. In addition, sand found inside the suspect's bag came from an area outside Japan, though it was never confirmed exactly where. Because of these findings, investigators traveled to South Korea but found no matches in fingerprint databases. Police had a few leads that might have helped them catch the killer, but they were ignored at the time. On the morning of December 31st, a man with a deep cut on his right hand was seen at Tobu Nikko Station, about 3 hours away from Setagaya. He asked for first aid, saying he had accidentally cut himself with a knife on the train. But when police checked, there was no blood on the train. A taxi driver also reported picking up 3 men near the Miyazawa house that night. When they got out, he noticed blood on the seat. Another woman reported almost hitting a man running from the Miyazawa home. But police dismissed these sightings, focusing only on the fingerprints left at the crime scene. By the time they followed up months later, it was too late. The biggest mystery in this case is the motive. Some think it was a robbery gone wrong, but that doesn't explain why the killer stayed for so long. He stole 15,000 yen, but left behind 19,000 yen in cash and foreign currency. If he was only after money, why kill everyone, including the children? Another theory is that it was a personal grudge. The way Isuko and Nina were stabbed more brutally than Mikio and Rei suggests the killer might have had a specific hatred toward them. But even now, no one knows the truth. The case remains unsolved. Yoshio Kodaira wasn't just another guy. His life had been rough from the start. As a child, he had a speech problem that made him deeply insecure. He later joined the Navy, but that didn't make things better. Kodaira was involved in the Jinan Incident, a violent clash between Chinese and Japanese forces. It started when Japanese civilians were killed and escalated into a full-blown battle that left thousands dead. Kodaira personally took part in the killings, though the exact number of victims is unknown. Reports also say that while in China, he assaulted many women. When he returned from the war, his life was a mess. He had been married, but his wife left him after he cheated on her. But instead of moving on, Kodaira was furious. He attacked his wife's family and killed his father-in-law. Between 1945 and 1946, Kodaira tricked at least 7 women by offering food or work, things that were in short supply after the war. Being a former soldier, he seemed trustworthy, so many women believed him. But once he got them alone in the forest, he assaulted and murdered them. He was arrested on August 20th, 1946, and convicted for those 7 murders, though it's believed there were more victims. During questioning, he seemed disturbingly proud of what he had done, even exposing himself to an interrogator. He said, "I know many people did terrible things during the war, but I don't think anyone has done such horrible things in peacetime." Kodaira was executed on October 5th, 1949. Before his death, he left a statement asking for forgiveness. Whether he truly felt remorse, we'll never know. The seven-faced murderer. In criminal investigations, identifying the victim is usually a huge step forward. And if the police can figure out who the perpetrator is, they can often solve the case quickly. But what happens when the criminal goes to extreme lengths to hide their true identity? Imagine a murderer with 7 different identities, each with a convincing backstory. This is the case of the seven-faced murderer, the first criminal in Japan to ever have a bounty placed on her head. In 1982, a woman's body was found buried on a mountain in Matsuyama City, Japan. She had been strangled, making it clear that she was murdered. Identifying her was easy since she was buried near her home. The police started their investigation and quickly realized that her belongings were missing. The case was classified as a robbery, murder, and abandonment of a corpse. The victim, Atsuko Yokota, was a top hostess at a local bar. Other than the marks on her neck, there were no signs of struggle or injury. Police questioned Atsuko's family, friends, and co-workers, but no new leads surfaced. A few days later, something suspicious happened. Atsuko's father noticed activity in her bank account. Someone was trying to withdraw money, even though she was already dead. He reported this to the police, who immediately started investigating. Around the same time, Atsuko's boyfriend told authorities that some of their belongings were missing from their shared apartment. At first, police assumed the suspect had vanished without a trace. But then a key witness, the apartment staff, reported seeing 3 men and a woman loading furniture into a rental truck. This gave investigators a solid lead. They tracked the truck using its license plate, found the rental records, and got a name connected to the case. With this information, they visited the renter's home. When police arrived, Kazuko Fukuda's husband answered the door. During questioning, he made a shocking confession. He admitted to burying Atsuko's body, but claimed he did it under Kazuko's orders. As soon as Kazuko heard the police were coming, she ran. Using a fake name, she took a taxi and disappeared, beginning her life on the run. Kazuko's face name and description were broadcast nationwide. She was officially wanted for murder and corpse abandonment. But this case was far from over. As time passed and the media coverage intensified, Kazuko didn't just hide, she became bolder. Let me tell you a little bit about her upbringing so you'd have a better understanding of what led to all of this. She was born on January 2nd, 1948 in Matama, Japan. Her early life was far from stable. Her mother allegedly ran a brothel out of their home, and there was little information about her father, who reportedly disappeared after her parents divorced. Kazuko and her mother moved frequently before her mother remarried a fisherman. In high school, Kazuko fell in love with a classmate, but tragedy struck when he died in a car accident. Devastated, she dropped out of school, unable to cope with the loss and her unstable home life. Her parents fought constantly, making home unbearable. Eventually, she ran away. In 1966, at 18, Kazuko was arrested for robbing the home of a high-ranking official in Japan's tax agency. While in prison, she became involved in what's now known as the Matsuyama Prison Incident. Male and female prisoners were kept in separate areas, but they could still interact at certain times. Kazuko, along with other female inmates, was sexually assaulted by male prisoners who had bribed the guards. The perpetrators later took their own lives. After serving 2 years, Kazuko was released at age 20. She soon married her first husband, but the marriage only lasted 5 years. In 1974, she remarried and had 4 children. For a while, it seemed like she had finally found stability, but that didn't last. Kazuko had a taste for luxury and spent far beyond her means. She bought expensive clothes and other high-end items. She lied to friends, claiming she came from a wealthy family, living a lifestyle she couldn't afford. She partied, gambled, and racked up massive debts. Eventually, she owed 2 million yen. Desperate for money, she became a cabaret hostess using the fake name Hatsumi Takai. At the club, she got involved with several wealthy clients, hoping to secure financial support. But her money problems only got worse. Then a new hostess, Atsuko Yokota, joined the cabaret. Atsuko was everything Kazuko wanted to be: beautiful, elegant, and adored by clients. She quickly became the club's top hostess, making far more money than Kazuko. Jealousy consumed Kazuko. She couldn't stand watching Atsuko live a luxurious life while she struggled. Her envy turned into a twisted motivation. She didn't just want to eliminate her competition, she wanted to steal her life. One evening, Kazuko approached Atsuko and asked if they could spend time together. She acted friendly, saying she admired Atsuko and wanted tips on how to succeed as a hostess. Atsuko agreed, not knowing she had just walked into a deadly trap. On August 19, 1982, Kazuko visited Atsuko's apartment. Seeing Atsuko's lavish home filled with expensive furniture and decorations fueled her jealousy even more. At some point, Kazuko snapped. She grabbed a towel and strangled Atsuko to death. Afterwards, she went home and told her husband everything. She convinced him to help her steal Atsuko's belongings, claiming it would solve their financial problems. She even got a relative to rent a moving truck, lying that a friend needed help relocating. Her plan was to erase all evidence and make it seem like Atsuko had vanished voluntarily. In Japan, some people disappear to escape debt or societal pressure. Kazuko used this to craft a cover story, making it look like Atsuko had simply run away. She even stole Atsuko's bank information, gaining access to 9 million yen, enough to pay off her debts. Kazuko and her husband drove 18 kilometers to Matsuyama Mountain and buried Atsuko's body in a remote area, hoping no one would find it. But the next day she made a critical mistake. She tried to withdraw money from Atsuko's account. This raised red flags for Atsuko's family, who quickly reported it, and this is where she ran away. She changed her name to Shinobu Onoda and moved to Kanazawa City. She found work as a hostess at a snack bar, but her face was already all over the news. She feared being recognized, so she underwent cosmetic surgery to change her appearance. Feeling safe with her new look, she returned to Kanazawa, still using a fake identity. For a while, she evaded capture. But on the 39th day of her escape, she was on the phone with her lover when she sensed something was wrong. The police were with him, listening to their call. Kazuko realized the police were tracking her phone, so she tricked them by making it seem like she was in Kanai instead of Kanazawa. The police believed the fake location and followed the wrong trail, giving Kazuko the chance to escape. She started a new life under the name Shinobu Onodera in Kanawa. A year after committing murder, she was working at a snack bar when she met a married man who owned a confectionery shop. They had an affair, and he eventually divorced his wife to be with her. Although they never officially registered their marriage, Kazuko helped him rebuild his shop, and under her management, the business thrived. Kazuko stayed in touch with her son, and later asked him to come live with her. She introduced him to her husband as a relative's child, and he worked at the shop as an apprentice. Over time, the husband grew suspicious, noticing how close they were. But despite his doubts, life went on peacefully for 5 years. One day, the husband saw a wanted poster of Kazuko near their shop. He asked her if she had heard of the woman in the poster. Though shaken, Kazuko lied skillfully and avoided suspicion for the time being. In February 1988, everything came crashing down after years of evading capture. The police finally uncovered Kazuko's whereabouts in Kanawa, thanks to new information provided by her family. As they closed in, Kazuko fled once again, leaving behind everything she had. After more than 15 years in hiding, she vanished from Ishikawa Prefecture. Kazuko resurfaced in Nagoya, assuming the name Kuramoto Kei and working as a cleaning lady. Despite undergoing plastic surgery, her appearance still resembled her old self, causing suspicion. To avoid being discovered, she kept moving, changing jobs, and adopting new identities. By May 1988, Kazuko left Nagoya, continuing her transient lifestyle for the next 8 years, while maintaining contact with her son. As the 15-year mark of her escape drew near, she had lived in over 15 different places, constantly altering her identity and appearance through 7 surgeries. She had successfully avoided capture for nearly 15 years. But with less than a year remaining before the statute of limitations expired, Kazuko reappeared in Huki. Unfazed by years of living as a fugitive, she was unaware that the police were about to make a historic move. For the first time in Japan, the police offered a 1 million yen bounty for information leading to Kazuko's capture. The case gained significant media attention, bringing her story into the public eye. Yet Kazuko remained calm. Under the alias Yukiko Nakamura, she frequented a local Odin restaurant in Huki, where she charmed fellow patrons with karaoke and lively conversations. No one suspected she was the notorious fugitive. At the same time, Fuji TV's Nice Day program devoted nearly all of its airtime to a special on Kazuko, repeating a recording of her voice. One viewer, a 59-year-old man who often visited the Odin restaurant, recognized the voice. It sounded exactly like Yuki, the woman who sang karaoke with him. He immediately reported his suspicions to the police, who acted on the tip. On July 29th, they brought Kazuko in for questioning after she visited the restaurant again. During the interrogation, Kazuko casually drank alcohol but refused to allow her fingerprints to be taken. She quickly left and stopped returning to the restaurant. The police requested the restaurant owner provide the bottle she had been drinking from and other items she had touched. Using these, they lifted her fingerprints and confirmed they matched the ones found on Atsuko's body years earlier. With just 23 days left before the statute of limitations expired, Kazuko was finally captured. She was arrested in 1997 after the Odin shop owner invited her back. Unaware that the police were closing in, she returned, only to be surrounded and taken into custody. Her 15 years of running ended, and she was indicted for the murder of Atsuko on August 18th, just 11 hours before the statute of limitations expired. Kazuko was sentenced to life imprisonment in May 1999. Her defense argued that she had killed Atsuko out of passion, possibly due to a romantic attraction, in an attempt to reduce her sentence. However, the court rejected the appeal, and in 2003, the Supreme Court upheld her life sentence. In one of her rare interviews, she was asked why she returned to the Odin shop despite knowing she could be caught. Her response was telling. People who have always known the sunny side of the road will never understand the life of someone who has always lived in the shadows like me. Kazuko passed away from illness in March 2005 at the age of 57 while still incarcerated. She spent 17 years in captivity before her death. In her final moments, she requested to be remembered by her true name, Kazuko, not by any of the aliases she had used while on the run. Her arrogance and the prolonged pursuit captivated the public, but in the end, no matter how far she ran or how much she changed, the weight of her crimes caught up with her. Miyuki Ishikawa was a respected midwife in post-war Tokyo, known for her qualifications and dedication. She worked at Kotobuki Sanien, a maternity home where struggling mothers sought help during one of the most vulnerable times in their lives. People trusted her to provide care, but behind this image, she hid a horrifying secret. Instead of protecting newborns, Ishikawa preyed on poor mothers who couldn't afford to raise their children. Japan lacked proper foster care at the time, and rather than finding a solution, she chose neglect. Babies left in her care slowly died from lack of attention, turning what should have been a place of safety into a house of death. She wasn't working alone. Her husband Takeshi Ishikawa and a doctor named Shiro Nakayama helped her. Together they convinced desperate parents that paying them was a better option than struggling to raise a child. But instead of providing help, they were profiting from murder. At a time when raising a child was already difficult, their actions were beyond cruel. In 1948, authorities discovered the remains of some of their victims, exposing the horrific truth about the maternity home. The scale of their crimes was shocking. Over 80 infants had died. Yet despite the number of victims, Miyuki Ishikawa and her husband were only convicted for 5 deaths. Even worse, their prison sentences were surprisingly short given the extent of their crimes. The mysterious vanishing of Megumi and Narumi. This story takes place in the spring of 1996 in Japan. 2 high school students, Megumi Yasugi and Narumi Takumi, were known for their cheerful personalities and love for ghost stories. In early May, they heard about the abandoned Tsubono Hotel, a well-known ghost hunting spot, from a new friend they met at a local park. On the evening of May 5th, around 9 p.m., they told their families they were heading out and stopped at a supermarket where they had worked to buy a flashlight and batteries. They invited another friend, but that person declined. At 10 p.m., the girls were seen meeting someone at the park, but this person's identity remains unknown. Shortly after their car was seen heading toward Uozu City, which was later confirmed by police. At 11 p.m., Megumi and Narumi sent a message from their pager saying they were in Uozu. After that, they vanished without a trace. Their families didn't immediately report them missing, assuming they were just out exploring. But after 2 days without any contact, they grew worried. The girls weren't the type to just disappear. Their families finally contacted the police, but because it was Golden Week, a major Japanese holiday, the investigation moved slowly. Privacy laws made it difficult for authorities to release their names since they had just turned 19. It wasn't until nearly a year later that their names were made public. During the investigation, it was revealed that Megumi and Narumi had already visited the Tsubono Hotel before May 5th. They had explored the area and planned to return to check out the eerie ruins. But that night, both they and their car disappeared without a trace. The Tsubono Hotel, located about 60 kilometers east of Himi, was once a thriving spa and retreat. However, in the early 1980s, the hotel manager disappeared after going bankrupt, and the place was abandoned. During Japan's economic boom, it was auctioned off for 35 million yen, but was abandoned again when the economy crashed. Over time, it became a hideout for criminals and thrill-seekers. Long before its abandonment, there were already rumors of ghost sightings, which turned the hotel into a famous ghost hunting location. By 2023, after years of disturbances and trespassing, authorities decided to demolish it. But its eerie reputation only fueled speculation about what happened to Megumi and Narumi. The lack of evidence led to numerous theories. One of the most chilling ideas was that the girls were victims of kamikakushi, meaning taken away by supernatural forces. Many old stories tell of people suddenly vanishing, only to reappear confused or forever lost. Some even wondered if the mysterious person the girls met that night wasn't human at all, but a spirit luring them into the unknown. Another theory suggested a darker human element. The Tsubono Hotel had a grim history. Some claimed its owner had died by suicide after financial ruin, and others spoke of a schoolboy who drowned in one of the spa pools. Could the girls have fallen victim to something sinister? A more politically charged theory pointed to North Korea. During that time, North Korea had abducted many Japanese citizens, with around 120 of the 470 reported abductions occurring near the Uozu area. Since the Tsubono Hotel was close to known abduction routes, some believe the girls may have been kidnapped by North Korean agents. Years later, an anonymous post on a popular internet forum claimed to reveal the truth. The post, written in 2001 by someone calling themselves A, described a conversation they had with a suspicious man at a snack shop in 1997. The man told A that Megumi and Narumi had met two men who offered to go ghost hunting with them. The girls split into two cars, unaware of the danger. Instead of going to the Tsubono Hotel, they were taken to an abandoned hospital near Futagami Mountain, where 3 other men were waiting. The man claimed that after assaulting the girls, they killed them to prevent them from going to the police. Their bodies, he said, were dumped in a manhole on Futagami Mountain, while their car was either left at the Tsubono Hotel or disposed of elsewhere. Some believed this chilling account, but others dismissed it as drunken rambling or an internet hoax. Still, it added another disturbing layer to the mystery. For years, theories swirled, but in 2014, 3 men came forward with a shocking revelation. They claimed that on the night of May 5, 1996, they saw a car with 2 young women near the port in Himi, Toyama. As they watched, the car suddenly rolled backward into the sea. Terrified of being blamed, they ran away and kept their silence for 18 years. The police took their story seriously, but did not immediately investigate. It wasn't until 2020, 24 years after the girls disappeared, that they finally sent divers to search the water near the port. At a depth of 8 meters, they found a sunken car. Though the car was recovered, there are still many unanswered questions. Did the girls accidentally drive into the sea, or was foul play involved, and if so, by whom? The case remains one of Japan's most baffling, unsolved mysteries, leaving people to wonder, was it a terrible accident, a sinister crime, or something beyond human understanding? Akira Nishiguchi's story began in Fukuoka, but took a dark turn in the bustling streets of Tokyo between October and December of 1963. As a child, Nishiguchi was raised in a strict Catholic school on Goto Island. His parents had high hopes for him, dreaming that he would one day become a priest. But Nishiguchi had no interest in a righteous path. He was drawn to crime. He started stealing and scamming at a young age, cycling in and out of juvenile detention. Fast forward a few years, and he was a married man. But despite having a family, his life was a mess. He was drowning in debt, having an affair, and his criminal tendencies had only worsened. Desperate for money, Nishiguchi took a darker turn. He committed murder. Not just once, but twice, killing people he actually knew in order to steal from them. He managed to get away with about 27,000 yen, which was worth less than $1,000 today. Hardly a fortune, especially for something that could cost him his life. But he wasn't worried. The police were already suspicious of him, so he staged his own suicide. He wrote a fake suicide note, put it in his pants pocket, then threw the pants and a pair of shoes off the side of a ship, hoping authorities would believe he had jumped to his death. It didn't work. With no body found, police weren't convinced. Meanwhile, Nishiguchi went on the run, constantly changing disguises and identities. In one city, he was a devoted boyfriend. In another, a scam artist pretending to be a courthouse accountant. Elsewhere, he posed as a lawyer, stealing and even killing along the way. His downfall came in Kumamoto, thanks to a sharp-eyed 10-year-old girl. Nishiguchi had been trying to scam her father, an educator, but the girl recognized his fake police badge and remembered his face from a wanted poster. Her father wasn't completely sure at first, so he contacted the police. They told him Nishiguchi had a scar on his chest, a way to confirm his identity. The father invited Nishiguchi to a bathhouse the next morning, but Nishiguchi kept his chest covered. It didn't matter. The police were waiting for them when they returned, and he was arrested on January 3, 1964. Despite being sentenced to death, Nishiguchi continued corresponding with the educator who helped catch him, seemingly trying to understand the criminal mind. But that didn't change his fate. His execution was carried out in 1970. Yukio Yamaji had a rough childhood in Yamaguchi. At just 16, he was already dealing with an alcoholic father and a mother who spent recklessly, leaving their family in financial trouble. Caught in the middle of their problems, he had nowhere to turn. To escape, he started wandering into toy stores, not to buy anything since he had no money, but just to get a glimpse of what a normal life might be like. While doing this, he developed a crush on a store clerk. But then his mother started calling the store to check up on him. Whether she was being protective or suspicious, something about her interference made him snap. Yamaji already resented his mother. His father had died from cirrhosis, likely due to his drinking, and his relationship with his mother had only gotten worse after that. So one day, when she denied calling the store, he grabbed a metal bat and beat her to death. Then, as if nothing had happened, he went about his daily life, working, visiting the store, even returning home like normal. When he finally saw his mother's lifeless body, he called the police and was arrested. He was sent to juvenile detention, and you might think this was a moment of regret, that calling the cops meant he felt guilty. But not really. Yamaji learned nothing from the experience. After serving his sentence, he was released in 2004. Just a year later, in 2005, he attacked a woman with a knife as she was returning home from work. He then assaulted and murdered her 19-year-old sister before setting their apartment on fire. When police caught him less than a month later, he admitted that after killing his mother, he had never been able to forget the feeling of taking a life. He simply wanted to see human blood again. Yamaji was sentenced to death and was executed on July 28, 2009, alongside Hiroshi Maeue, the so-called suicide website murderer. Kiyoshi Okubo is often considered one of Japan's most infamous criminals. He was born on January 17, 1935, in what is now Takasaki City, as the third of 8 children. His eldest brother passed away soon after birth, and his father, an engineer for the Ministry of Railways, lost his job in 1949 following World War II. His mother had Russian ancestry, and his parents eventually divorced. Okubo's father remarried, and his new household environment was highly dysfunctional. Growing up during the war, Okubo faced bullying due to his mixed heritage, as Japan was in conflict with the Soviet Union at the time. He struggled academically and disliked school. By 1946, at just 11 years old, he committed his first known offense, targeting a young girl. His mother intervened on his behalf, and he was not punished. He dropped out of high school in 1952 at 17 and began working in an electronics store in Tokyo. The following year, he attempted to start a radio repair business at his parents' home, but his lack of technical skills and access to parts made it unsustainable. To support himself, he resorted to shoplifting and was arrested 8 times between 1953 and 1954. His father managed to settle the cases financially, but the business was eventually shut down. In 1955, Okubo committed another serious crime, targeting a 17-year-old girl under false pretenses. He was sentenced to a 1.5 years in prison, but was released early for good behavior. However, soon after, he reoffended and was imprisoned again, this time for 3 years and 6 months. Despite his repeated offenses, he was granted parole in 1959. By 1960, Okubo was again luring young women under false identities, and his own family intervened when they discovered what he was doing. A legal settlement allowed him to avoid prosecution. The following year, he met a woman and married her in 1962. They had 2 children, a son in 1963 and a daughter in 1966. He attempted to establish a milk delivery business with his younger brother, but conflict arose when his brother attempted to take goods without payment. This resulted in Okubo being arrested for extortion and sentenced to a year in prison with a 4-year suspended sentence. It was only then that his wife learned about his criminal past. After his release, Okubo's reputation followed him. In 1966 and 1967, he abducted and harmed young women on multiple occasions, leading to another arrest and a sentence of 3 years and 6 months in prison. His previous suspended sentence was revoked, adding an extra 4 years and 6 months to his time. While incarcerated, he was considered a model prisoner and even received commendations from the prison director. His wife sought a divorce, but he managed to prevent it from being finalized. Upon his release, he returned to live with his parents and attempted to reconcile with his wife, but she refused. Feeling hopeless about his future, he made the chilling decision to escalate his crimes. In March 1971, he purchased a new car and began using it to lure women, leading to a series of tragic events over the next several weeks. Between March 31st and May 10, 1971, he was responsible for the deaths of 8 young women, all between the ages of 16 and 21. He primarily targeted students and young professionals, using deception to get them into his vehicle. One of his intended victims managed to escape, leading to an eventual investigation. The key breakthrough in the case came when the brother of one of the victims saw her entering Okubo's car and noted the vehicle's details. This information led to a police manhunt involving 70 patrol cars. On May 14th, Okubo was arrested while in his car with another young woman. Before officers took him in, he handed her money and advised her to take a taxi home. Initially, Okubo denied many of the accusations, but as more evidence surfaced and bodies were discovered, he eventually confessed. He led investigators to the locations where he had hidden his victims. His crimes shocked Japan, and he was soon put on trial. His first court appearance took place on October 25, 1971. Psychological evaluations found that while he did not have a severe mental illness, he displayed an abnormal personality. On February 22, 1973, he was sentenced to death. When asked for a comment by reporters, he reflected on his life, saying that if he could be reborn, he would like to come back as a weed, something that could endure and grow back, no matter how many times it was stepped on. Okubo did not appeal his sentence, and his case remains one of the most disturbing in Japan's criminal history. Tomohiro Kato grew up under extreme pressure from his parents. While strict parenting is common in Japan, his upbringing crossed into outright abuse. He was forced to eat scraps off the floor and stand in the snow for hours as punishment. By the time he reached adulthood, things weren't looking much better. At 25 years old, in 2008, Kato was struggling. He couldn't hold down a steady job, his debts were piling up, and his personal life was falling apart. But he found comfort in the internet. Like many at the time, he turned to online spaces to connect with people who understood him. In the digital world, he didn't have to pretend, he could just be himself. But that escape didn't last. His online friends started to pull away, and soon he felt more invisible than ever. He was completely isolated, and as we've seen in many of these cases, isolation can lead to dangerous thoughts. Feeling lost and desperate for recognition, Kato decided he would make his mark in the worst way possible. If he couldn't be someone in life, maybe he could be remembered through death. It's a horrifying thought, but not an uncommon one among people in deep despair. On the day of the crime, Akihabara, a popular shopping district in Tokyo, became a scene of chaos. Kato rented a truck and drove straight into a crowd, killing 3 people and injuring 2 others. Then he got out of the truck and attacked 12 more people with a knife, killing 4. After the massacre, police found chilling posts he had made online before the attack. One message read, "I will kill people in Akihabara." Another said, "I don't have a single friend, and I never will." Kato was often referred to as a hikikomori, a Japanese term used for extreme social withdrawal. It describes both the state of isolation and the people who experience it. While not a medical disorder, it's a growing social phenomenon, and Kato's case is a tragic example of what can happen when loneliness turns to violence. In the end, he was convicted of murdering 7 people and sentenced to death in 2011. His execution was carried out in July 2022. Shojiro Nishimoto was born into wealth, the kind of life where everything should have been easy. But things don't always work out that way. After his parents divorced, he started drifting, first as a slacker, then as a struggling worker. He saw himself as the tragic main character in a life where everything seemed to go wrong. At one point, he tried to turn things around. He got married, but only by lying to his fiancée, telling her he was a successful businessman. In reality, he was drowning in debt, especially from unpaid car rentals. As his financial situation worsened, he became desperate. One night, his car ran out of gas, both literally and figuratively, as he was at his breaking point. With no money for a ride, he hailed a taxi, and instead of paying the fare, he brutally beheaded the driver, all for what amounted to around $100. But that was just the beginning. After the murder, he escalated quickly. He started breaking into homes, attacking residents, and stealing whatever cash he could find. His first victim was a 77-year-old woman, from whom he stole 15,000 yen. Then he targeted a 69-year-old man, stealing 260,000 yen, not even $2,000. Finally, he killed a 74-year-old woman in another robbery. Nishimoto's downfall came when he attempted yet another burglary, but this time, a security alarm went off. With nowhere to run, he confessed to everything. Strangely, he also falsely confessed to a murder he didn't commit, later admitting it was a lie. He was sentenced to death and was among a group of inmates executed on January 29, 2009. Money is often seen as a way to happiness, but it can also bring trouble, greed, and worse. Japan was shocked by the mysterious death of Kosuke Nozaki, often called the Asian Don Juan, in 2018. This wealthy man from Kishu was found dead in his home. The main suspect, his much younger wife Saki Sudo. Though some evidence pointed to her, it wasn't strong enough to prove anything. Many believe she was after his money, but for now, those are just rumors. Kosuke Nozaki's life was quite a story. Born in 1941 in Wakayama to a middle-class family, he was one of 7 siblings. His parents ran a liquor business, and with little supervision growing up, he often got into trouble at school. He had poor grades and a reputation as a bully. Eventually, he dropped out and joined the family business. At the liquor store, Kosuke discovered his talent for business. He made the store thrive, earning his parents' praise and extra pocket money. For him, making money became his main goal. When his parents passed away, he inherited the family's assets. It's unclear if he shared them with his siblings. Instead of running the liquor store, he became a loan shark, lending money outside the legal system. He also invested in scrap metal and real estate. His real estate business eventually took off, making him very wealthy. Kosuke wasn't just rich, he was controversial. Some say he tricked business partners into bad deals. He even faced legal trouble once being tried for tax evasion. His risky lifestyle earned him enemies, and he once survived a stabbing by an acquaintance. His love for money was only matched by his love for young, beautiful women. He wrote in his autobiography that he craved sexual encounters more than luxury. He spent millions to satisfy these desires. Before meeting Saki Sudo, he was married at least twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Details about his previous wives and whether he had children remain unknown. In 2017, at 77, Kosuke wanted to settle down. That's when he met Saki Sudo, a 22-year-old beautician and former adult film actress. Their meeting was like something out of a movie. Kosuke faked a fall at Haneda Airport in Tokyo to get her attention. She helped him up and he asked her out that same night. Just a few months later, in February 2018, they had a grand wedding despite their 55-year age gap. Their marriage came with a special contract. Saki didn't have to do housework and was given 1 million yen, about $6,600 a month. To outsiders, they seemed happy, often seen walking Kosuke's dog or vacationing. But just months into the marriage, cracks started to show. Kosuke felt Saki didn't care about him. She wouldn't help him out of the car and kept expensive food to herself. He was considering divorce, but before he could file, he was found dead. It all started on May 6, 2018, when Kosuke's dog Eve suddenly fell ill and died in his arms. He was heartbroken. Just 18 days later, on May 24th, Kosuke was at home with Saki and their maid. The maid heard a thump from upstairs, but Saki dismissed it, saying, "Just leave him." Hours later, they found him unresponsive in his bedroom. The autopsy revealed he died from a lethal dose of stimulants. Since Kosuke had written that he never smoked or used drugs and tests showed no history of stimulant use, suspicion arose. There were no injection marks, meaning he likely ingested the drugs. Some experts suggested someone might have mixed them into a capsule. Adding to the mystery, his dog Eve's sudden death made people wonder if someone had tested the poison on her first. Police exhumed Eve's body for testing, but couldn't find conclusive evidence linking her death to stimulant poisoning. They also tested empty beer bottles, but found no traces of drugs. Despite the lack of hard evidence, something felt off about Kosuke's death. One of Kosuke's close aides, Mr. Yoshida, revealed that Kosuke had called him the day before his death, asking for help with his divorce. Yoshida believed Kosuke wanted him to break the news to Saki because he wasn't good at confrontation. This led many to suspect that the impending divorce might have played a role in his death. At Kosuke's funeral, Saki acted strangely. She was seen smiling and glued to her phone, showing little interest in the ceremony. She later claimed she was entitled to half of his fortune, but Kosuke's family fought against it. Another person under suspicion was the housekeeper who had worked for Kosuke for 30 years. A close family aide mentioned that she used to talk about a large sum of money Kosuke promised her, though it wasn't in his will. Strangely, after Kosuke's death, Saki claimed the housekeeper was entitled to some money, suggesting she might have been trying to work out a deal with her. As time passed, the case faded from public attention. But 3 years later, in 2021, police arrested Saki Sudo, claiming they had new evidence against her. She had previously said she wasn't upstairs between 4 and 6 p.m. on the day of Kosuke's death, but the investigation revealed inconsistencies in her statements. The case is still ongoing, and many questions remain unanswered. Was Kosuke's death a tragic accident, or was he murdered for his fortune? Only time will tell. The Takahashi Couple Murder. Moving to another country for work can seem like an exciting adventure, a chance to explore new cultures, meet new people, and build a dream life. But sometimes that dream takes a dark turn. In this case, greed led to a shocking crime that shook both Japan and the Philippines. This is the tragic story of the Takahashi couple. On January 18, 2024, 2 bodies wrapped in sheets were found under the floor of a home in Tokyo's Adachi ward. The victims were a married couple in their 50s. Their eldest son, Ichiro, made the horrific discovery after returning home from work. As soon as he entered, he noticed small blood stains on the floor. It was unusual. His mother was always in the kitchen around that time, or he'd find his parents chatting in the living room. But that day, the house was eerily silent and darker than usual. Feeling uneasy, he put on his indoor slippers and walked further inside, spotting more blood stains scattered throughout the house. He called his parents' cell phones, but both were turned off. Panicked, he contacted his father's workplace, only to find out his dad hadn't shown up. His sister also had no idea where their parents were. Fearing the worst, Ichiro called the police. When officers arrived, they found the house surprisingly neat. There were no signs of a break-in or robbery. They searched for clues but found little to go on. The couple's phones were traced to the house, but there was no sign of them. With no evidence of a struggle or a clear motive, the police initially believed the Takahashis had been kidnapped. Neighbors had last seen Norihiro Takahashi around 1 p.m. on January 16th, stepping out of the house. His wife Kiyomi was seen leaving 30 minutes later, but returned shortly after. By 4:30 p.m. that day, both had seemingly vanished. 2 days later, on January 18th, police dogs sniffing the bloodstains led officers to check beneath the floorboards. There they made a discovery: the bodies of Norihiro and Kiyomi tightly wrapped inside a bag. Norihiro 55 and Kiyomi 52 both had multiple stab wounds. Bloodstains around the house, especially near the entrance, suggested a violent struggle, though some of the blood had been hastily wiped away. The police first questioned Ichiro, the son who had discovered the blood. He had lived with his parents for years and told them he last saw them on January 16th before leaving for work. However, neighbors reported hearing heated arguments between Ichiro and his father, mostly about money. It turned out Ichiro had recently borrowed a large sum from his father, which had caused tension. Additionally, the two had co-signed a property purchase worth $500,000, leading to a complicated legal situation over ownership. So because of these financial disputes, police considered the possibility that Ichiro had killed his parents in a fit of rage with Kiyomi as an unfortunate witness. However, his alibi was solid. His co-workers confirmed he had been at work the entire day. With Ichiro cleared, police had to look elsewhere for suspects. The Takahashi couple had lived in Adachi Ward for 2 years and were well liked in their neighborhood. Kiyomi was known for being kind and warm, always polite and reserved. Norihiro, on the other hand, had a more intimidating look. He often wore embroidered jackets and had a demeanor that some described as Yankee, a term used in Japan for people with a rebellious or tough past. However, he was friendly and well-mannered. Norihiro managed a small members-only bar in Sumida Ward. It wasn't a flashy place, just a quiet spot with room for about 20 customers. Many of his regulars traveled long distances just to visit. He was known for taking care of customers, even staying with those who missed the last train to keep them company until morning. He had a taste for expensive cars, but was never arrogant about it. Despite Norihiro's background, the couple didn't seem to be involved in any criminal activities. That's why many ruled out the idea of a business-related conflict as a possible motive. On January 17th, the day before police found the bodies, investigators reviewed security footage from the area. They noticed something strange. After Ichiro had left for work, 2 masked figures entered the Takahashi home. They stayed inside for hours before leaving in the afternoon. One of them was seen throwing something into a nearby trash bin. Police immediately searched the trash and found a bag containing bloody clothes. Forensic tests confirmed the blood matched that of Norihiro and Kiyomi. What initially seemed like a kidnapping case had now become a murder investigation. Later that evening, police conducted a full search of the house. Around 6 p.m., they noticed a strong smell coming from a storage compartment under the floorboards. When they opened it, they found the Takahashi's bodies both covered in stab wounds. Norihiro had been stabbed 10 times and Kiyomi 8. Most of the wounds were aimed at vital organs. Their estimated time of death was January 16th, the day they were last seen. Police believe the masked individuals seen on CCTV were the killers. They released images from the footage hoping someone would recognize them. At first, no one came forward, but when Ichiro saw the footage, he identified one of the suspects immediately. his ex-girlfriend Hazel Ann Baguisa Morales. Morales, a Filipino woman, had moved to Japan in 2017 at the age of 23. Fluent in Japanese and fitting local beauty standards, she found work as a hostess at a bar catering to the Filipino community. These bars were popular, but many foreign workers were employed illegally, leading Japan's government to tighten visa regulations. To get around this, some women entered fake marriages with Japanese men to obtain spouse visas, which allowed them to work freely. Morales did the same. She married the son of her bar's owner, even though he already had a girlfriend. Their marriage wasn't romantic. It was just a way for her to extend her stay in Japan. She was known for her charm and ability to attract wealthy customers. One man was rumored to have spent $138,000 in a single night just to be near her. However, when this customer saw her wedding photo online, he felt betrayed and cut ties with her. Not long after the bar was investigated, and Morales' fake marriage was exposed along with 25 others. She later moved to another bar and got a part-time job as a nurse, but she was still struggling financially. That's when she met Ichiro. They began dating, and she occasionally asked him for money to support her lifestyle. At first, his parents liked her. She was polite and well-spoken. But when Ichiro mentioned marriage, Kiyomi strongly opposed the idea. The exact reason is unknown, but it led Ichiro to break up with Morales. For a while, she disappeared from his life, until January 16th, the day of the murders. That afternoon, Morales called Ichiro for the first time in months, asking him to get back together. He brushed her off. Later that evening, she sent him a chilling message. "It's over." When Ichiro identified Morales in the CCTV footage, the police were sure she was involved in the crime. But they still had one big question. Who was the second person caught on camera? After more investigation, they found out that Morales had an accomplice. His name was Brian Jefferson Lizing de la Cruz, a 34-year-old Filipino. He had been to Japan at least twice, most recently on a temporary work visa for a technical training program in July of the previous year. On January 21st, de la Cruz was arrested. At first, Morales denied knowing him and insisted she had nothing to do with the murders. She claimed she had spent the day helping a friend look for an apartment. But under pressure, de la Cruz eventually broke down. He not only admitted to knowing Morales, but also confessed that they were both involved in the crime. The case is still open, and new investigations are underway. Japanese authorities are working with Philippine officials who are providing legal support. More evidence, including DNA and CCTV footage, has made the case against Morales and de la Cruz even stronger. However, final charges and court decisions are still pending. Norio Nagayama was born into extreme poverty and neglect. He was the seventh of 8 children raised in a home where his father was an alcoholic and money was always a struggle. Sometimes he had to dig through garbage just to find food. When he was in junior high, his father died and he turned to stealing. Maybe he wanted to help his struggling mother, who now had to raise 8 kids alone. But whatever his reasons, she kicked him out because of it. With nowhere to go, he moved to Tokyo, hoping for a fresh start. But his past followed him. His record of petty crimes made it nearly impossible to find a job, leaving him homeless and desperate. With no other way to survive, he started stealing again. Eventually, he was arrested for vandalizing a vending machine on an American military base. While in jail, his family reached out to him. After he was released, things seemed to be improving, but his emotional state worsened, and soon he stopped going to work or school. He was homeless again, stuck in a downward spiral. At first, he didn't want to hurt anyone. He just wanted to die. He stole a .22 caliber revolver from a military base, planning to use it on himself or force police to shoot him. But once he held the gun, something changed. For the first time, he felt powerful. Instead of turning it on himself, he turned it on others. He went on a violent crime spree, killing 4 people. And despite all the bloodshed, he only managed to steal about 16,000 yen. He was caught on April 7, 1969, and sentenced to death. His sentence was overturned, then reinstated, sparking a national debate. While waiting for execution, he focused on writing and publishing several novels and becoming more famous for his books than for his crimes. On August 1st, 1997, Norio Nagayama was executed. As stated in his will, his estate was used to create a foundation to help people suffering from poverty, the same struggle that shaped his own tragic life. Everyone has had a bad roommate, the kind who's noisy, late at night, never cleans up and makes life difficult. But this story goes far beyond that. In 2015, a 29-year-old woman named Terumi Morishima was living in a shared house in Japan with both men and women. She became close friends with her roommate Sako Watanabe. What Sako didn't know was that Terumi had been secretly stealing her identity and racking up huge debts in her name. Terumi wasn't just a bad roommate, she was dangerous, and she was willing to do anything to take over Sako's life. On Christmas Eve, Sako went missing. Just 4 days later, her body was found in a horrific state, so decomposed that only traces of DNA could be used to confirm it was her. The discovery shocked everyone. It was as if she had almost completely disappeared. With the festive season in full swing, the brutal crime sent chills through the community. On the night of December 25th, Sako's father became worried when he couldn't reach her. Her friends were also concerned, saying they hadn't heard from her since the day before. The same day, she was supposed to attend a Christmas party at her ex-roommate's house. When she didn't come home for Christmas as expected, her father reported her missing. Sako had moved to Osaka with plans to eventually take over her father's flower shop. She was working at a local florist and had a promising future ahead. But after the police started investigating, all clues pointed back to the share house where she had been living. The police quickly focused on Terumi Morishima, who had been Sako's roommate before moving into a nearby apartment about a month earlier. Security footage showed that Sako had entered the elevator to Terumi's apartment at 7 p.m. on December 24th, but there was no sign of her ever leaving. When Sako's friends went looking for her, Terumi claimed that Sako had stayed at her place to prepare for the party while she ran an errand. When she returned, Sako was gone. She guessed that maybe Sako had gone to see an ex-boyfriend since they had been talking about past relationships earlier that day. On December 25th, police discovered that someone had withdrawn 1,000 yen from Sako's bank account. The trail led back to Terumi. Surveillance footage showed her buying 3 liters of a powerful cleaning solution containing hydrochloric acid that same afternoon. She also purchased several suspicious items: a small freezer, a folding saw, a cutting board, plastic bags, and a bucket. The total cost of her shopping spree was about 36,000 yen. The evidence was piling up, so police brought her in for questioning. Terumi acted confused when asked about Sako's disappearance. She claimed that Sako had asked her to withdraw the money, but her explanation didn't add up. Usually, if someone asks you to take out cash for them, they tell you exactly when and where to give it to them. But Terumi had no details. She also said that Sako had requested the items she bought, which made no sense at all. On December 29th, during a search of Terumi's apartment, police made a horrifying discovery. They found bones, including a skull, spine, and pelvis, in her bathtub partially dissolved in acid. Other body parts were found in a small freezer. They also recovered knives, saws, and a blood-stained food waste disposer. When confronted with the evidence, Terumi chillingly responded, "There is a skull and flesh in the room, but I don't want to talk about it now." Investigators learned that Terumi had been plotting against Sako from the moment they met. Soon after moving into the share house, she had stolen Sako's driver's license and used it to take out loans 11 times, withdrawing a total of 61,000 yen in Sako's name. To fool bank employees, she removed her glasses, applied false eyelashes, and used heavy makeup to resemble Sako's photo. But when she could no longer take out more loans, she decided to commit the perfect crime: eliminate Sako and erase her own debts. The autopsy revealed that Sako had been suffocated, likely sometime between December 24th and 25th. Investigators believe that Terumi had drugged her with sleeping pills before strangling her. The same type of sleeping pill was found in Sako's system, pills that Terumi had been prescribed. After the murder, Terumi sent messages from Sako's phone to her family and friends, pretending everything was fine to buy herself time. A male friend even recalled calling Sako on the night of the incident. She had told him she needed a little more time to get ready for the party. But minutes later, Terumi showed up at the share house alone, claiming that Sako was still preparing. Not long after, the same friend received a text from Sako's phone saying she had an urgent issue and couldn't come back yet. But by then, Sako was already dead. The timeline of events matched the evidence. Between 7:52 p.m. on December 24th and 12:55 a.m. on December 25th, Terumi had strangled Sako while she was unconscious. But when questioned, she denied everything. She admitted to destroying loan documents and disposing of the body, but claimed that Sako was already dead when she got home. She even suggested that either someone else had killed her or that she had died naturally in the short time Terumi was away. Despite her denial, the evidence was overwhelming. In the days following the murder, Terumi had systematically dismembered the body. She bought a food waste disposer and a food processor, attempting to grind down the remains. Some parts were thrown into the garbage disposal of her apartment building, while others were boiled in a pressure cooker. But her attempts to cover up the crime were sloppy. Instead of getting rid of everything, she hid Sako's hands and feet inside a closet and kitchen cabinet back at the share house. Investigators believed she was trying to scatter the remains in different places to avoid suspicion. Her internet history revealed disturbing searches in the days leading up to the crime. She had looked up methods for dismembering bodies, how to break bones, ways to knock someone out, and even how to commit the perfect murder. She had also searched for what happens to bank accounts when someone goes missing. During her trial, Terumi's defense team attempted to gain sympathy by bringing up her troubled past. They claimed she had suffered abuse from her mother's boyfriend as a child, both physical and sexual. They also revealed that she had secretly given birth as a teenager, only for the baby to be taken away and thrown into a dam by her mother's partner. They argued that her past trauma made her mentally unstable, and that her actions after Sako's death were just a way of avoiding reality, like when she had once hidden the death of a pet dog from her mother. But none of it changed the facts of the case. On June 30th, 2017, Terumi Morishima was sentenced to life in prison. The court ruled that her crime was premeditated, that she had clear intent, and that her actions, both before and after the murder, were calculated and extremely cruel. Her attempt to erase Sako's existence had failed. Instead, she became known as one of Japan's most disturbing criminals. In 1988, Tsutomu Miyazaki turned 26. Instead of celebrating with friends or family, he chose to do something horrific. He kidnapped a young individual, took her in his car, and spent about half an hour with her before killing her and doing terrible things to her body. He kept her hands and feet as sick reminders of what he had done. To make things even worse, he burned parts of her body and sent the ashes to her family, along with a note mocking them and daring them to catch him. This was just the beginning. Miyazaki went on to kidnap, kill, and abuse the bodies of 4 young individuals. He took one of his victims back to his apartment, where he took photos and videos of the horrible acts he committed. He also kept her hands and feet, later admitting he drank the blood and even ate parts of them. Miyazaki's descent into darkness seemed to speed up after his grandfather died. His grandfather was the only family member he felt close to, and after his death, Miyazaki became extremely isolated. This theme of isolation is common in many cases involving killers. Miyazaki was finally caught on July 23, 1989, after a failed attempt to kidnap another individual. When police searched his home, they found thousands of videotapes, including footage and photos of his victims. These crimes, known as the young individual murders, caused widespread fear in Japan. After his arrest, the case also led to criticism of otaku culture, which refers to an intense obsession with things like anime and manga. Miyazaki's obsession with anime and horror was seen as part of his disturbing behavior. Forensic evidence like DNA and fiber analysis helped connect Miyazaki to the crimes, but it was his own documentation and confession that ultimately sealed his fate. Despite his defense claiming he was insane, Miyazaki was found mentally competent and fully aware of his actions. He even sent a letter to one of the families showing he knew exactly what he was doing. Miyazaki was executed on June 17, 2008. Children are often seen as innocent, easily moved to tears, and unaware of the darker sides of life. But sometimes the unthinkable happens, and a child becomes the perpetrator of a crime so shocking it leaves an entire nation in disbelief. Today we turn our attention to Japan and the tragic case of Satomi Mitarai, more commonly known as the Nevada Tan murder. On June 1, 2004, during a regular lunch break at Okubo Elementary School, a teacher noticed that 2 of her students were missing. Initially, she assumed they might have gone to the restroom together or were eating elsewhere, and dismissed the concern. However, her worries escalated when one of the missing students, Natsumi Tsuji, returned to class carrying a box of blood-stained cut-up clothing. Concerned for Natsumi's safety, the teacher checked her for injuries and asked if she was hurt. To everyone's shock, Natsumi admitted the blood wasn't hers. She had done something terrible. Alarmed, the staff began searching for the other missing student, Satomi Mitarai. Their worst fears were confirmed when they found Satomi's lifeless body in a pool of blood near the entrance of an empty classroom on the 3rd floor. Chaos erupted as the school staff called the police and notified the students' parents. When emergency services arrived, Satomi's father, Kyoji Mitarai, struggled to comprehend the brutal reality of his daughter's death. He recalled that Satomi had never had conflicts with her classmates and had always seemed to get along with everyone. Katsuyoshi Tomonaga from the Sasebo Central Fire Department reported that Satomi had suffered multiple deep slashes on her wrists and neck, with one gash on her throat measuring nearly 4 inches long. She had died from massive blood loss. The police then escorted a remorseful Natsumi to the station. She cried and apologized, appearing as any distressed child might. But the question remained, why had she done it? Natsumi soon revealed the motive behind her horrifying act. She and Satomi had been friends sharing interests in basketball and browsing the internet. But on May 27, 2004, Natsumi discovered that Satomi had been talking badly about her to their other classmates, calling her names like fatty. At first, Natsumi tried to ignore the insults, but Satomi continued mocking her. Over the next few days, Natsumi considered harming Satomi. She debated different methods, using an ice pick, a box cutter, or even strangulation. But each time she saw Satomi at school, she hesitated. However, on the night of May 28th, Satomi once again insulted her. This time, Natsumi saw the offensive message online before it was deleted. Furious, she responded with a chilling threat she would kill her. Satomi, seemingly unfazed, did not take the warning seriously, but for Natsumi this was the final straw. On June 1st, during their lunch break, Natsumi lured Satomi into an empty classroom. According to her confession to the school counselor, she closed the curtains to darken the room. She attempted to cover Satomi's eyes, but failed. Without hesitation, she took out a box cutter and slashed Satomi's throat. Then she watched for 15 minutes as Satomi bled to death. When Natsumi was arrested, her identity was initially protected under Japanese law, referred to only as Girl A. However, the case became widely known as the Nevada Tan murder after a class photo surfaced online, showing Natsumi wearing a sweater with the word Nevada on it. Internet users attached the affectionate suffix tan to her name, turning her into an unsettling online figure. Investigators delved into Natsumi's background to understand what had driven her to commit such a gruesome act. They discovered that she had a deep interest in horror movies, books, and dark internet forums. She was a fan of the controversial novel and movie Battle Royale, and often consumed related fan fiction. Reports even suggested that she had visited the infamous Red Room website, an urban legend about a cursed webpage linked to violent deaths. Further investigation revealed that Natsumi's anger wasn't just directed at Satomi, but at her entire class, whom she believed had been bullying her. On her personal website, she expressed contempt for her classmates, even writing an internal dialogue where she debated whether taking a life was justifiable. A forensic psychologist evaluated Natsumi and found no signs of severe psychological distress. While the public speculated she was a hikikomori, a socially withdrawn individual, there was no evidence to support this. Some sources suggested that she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition affecting social interactions and communication. However, there was no official confirmation. The head of the Sasebo Children's Counseling Center noted how normal Natsumi appeared. She had not suffered abuse at home and did not seem like a troubled child. This made it all the more unsettling. How could an ordinary girl commit such a crime? Her defense team argued that she was heavily influenced by the violent media she consumed, warning parents to be mindful of their children's exposure to such content. However, this did not absolve her of responsibility. On September 15, 2004, the Japanese family court sentenced Natsumi to 2 years of involuntary commitment, later extended by another 2 years in 2006. She was sent to a juvenile reformatory in Tochigi Prefecture. Her case had a profound impact on Japan, reigniting debates about the country's juvenile justice system. Some argued that the age of criminal responsibility, which had been previously lowered to 14 due to another child murder case, should be further reduced. For Satomi's father, the tragedy was unbearable. During the trial, he published a heartbreaking letter to his daughter in a national newspaper, wondering if she was happy, if she had met her late mother, and why she was taken from him so soon. Satomi had been his source of strength after his wife's passing, and now he was left to grieve alone. During the Okubo Elementary School graduation ceremony, on March 18, 2005, the school left blank pages in the yearbook where Satomi and Natsumi's photos would have been. Satomi was posthumously awarded a graduation certificate, which her father accepted. Natsumi also received one as the school believed it would aid her reintegration into society. Meanwhile, the internet took a disturbing turn. Online communities, particularly 2channel and Futaba Channel, became obsessed with Natsumi, glorifying her as Nevada-tan. They created memes, fan art, and even cosplayed as her. In June 2005, a mass cosplay event featured people dressed as Nevada-tan, and the Nevada University hoodie became a top-selling item. The murder was treated like an internet horror story, similar to a creepypasta. Even when authorities tried to remove the content, it kept resurfacing. An eerie song titled Cutie Nevada was even released, adding to the unsettling online phenomenon. As of today, Natsumi Tsuji has been released and granted a new identity, allowing her to live in anonymity. Her family moved to an undisclosed location in Japan. While some believe Satomi's bullying played a role in her fate, nothing justifies such a violent end. Juvenile crime rates in the Asia-Pacific region have risen over the years, with offenses ranging from drug-related activities to severe bullying. Factors like socioeconomic status, media influence, and parental upbringing all play a role. One question remains: do some children feel protected by their age when committing crimes? Juvenile facilities prioritize rehabilitation over punishment, which might feel more like a school detention than a prison sentence. Do you remember that one popular girl in high school, the one who wasn't just pretty, but also smart, kind, and loved by everyone? Have you ever wondered what became of her? You might think that someone like that would have an easy and happy life. But what if she never got to experience adulthood? Today we're looking at a tragic case from Japan that remained unsolved for nearly 14 years, until another incident finally led to the truth. This is the case of Satomi Kitaguchi's murder. On October 5, 2004, a girl we'll call A stayed home from school because she wasn't feeling well. She was at her grandmother Michio's house, resting, when her older sister Satomi arrived around 1 p.m. A saw Satomi go into the kitchen before heading to another part of the house, possibly her own room in a separate building next door. At around 3 p.m., girl A heard a strange shrieking noise, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Then she heard what sounded like a girl screaming and something tumbling down the stairs. Alarmed, she cracked open the back door and looked toward the entrance of the detached house. From inside, she could hear loud bangs and more screams. She immediately alerted her grandmother, and together they rushed toward Satomi's room. What they saw was a nightmare. Satomi was lying in a pool of blood, and standing over her was a stranger holding a knife. A was frozen in shock, unable to move, while her grandmother screamed. The intruder then attacked Michio, stabbing her before fleeing the scene. Girl A managed to escape and hid at a nearby gardening center where she called for help. Police arrived shortly after and began investigating. Michio was severely injured but managed to survive. However, Satomi had suffered over 10 stab wounds and was already beyond saving. The bright, kind-hearted 17-year-old had been murdered in her own home right in front of her sister and grandmother. Inside the house, nothing appeared to be stolen, and there were no signs of forced entry. This suggested the attack wasn't a robbery but something more personal. Police found a shoe print matching a Dunlop sneaker size 26 to 27 centimeter. The print indicated the attacker had followed Satomi from her bedroom to the entryway. They also discovered a fingerprint on the bedroom door handle and dandruff under Satomi's nails, from which they extracted male DNA. Based on these clues, police suspected a stalker. The killer seemed familiar with the layout of the house and had gone directly to Satomi's room, suggesting they were someone from her school, neighborhood, or even family circle with an unhealthy obsession. An intense investigation followed. Police searched the entire property, questioned neighbors, and even set up roadblocks to gather information. However, because the murder occurred on a weekday afternoon, there were few witnesses. Michio, suffering from trauma-induced amnesia, couldn't recall key details. But Girl A provided a crucial description of the suspect, a young man around 20 years old, approximately 165 centimeter tall, with a stocky build, short, spiky, brown-dyed hair, a round face, narrow eyes, and some pimples. Despite having DNA evidence and a description, the investigation hit a dead end. In 2004, not all fingerprints and DNA samples were recorded in police databases, making it difficult to track the perpetrator. The Kitaguchi family refused to give up. They printed thousands of flyers with the suspect's sketch and handed them out to everyone they could. Satomi's friends helped distributing flyers and spreading awareness. The police received over 400 tips, but none led to a breakthrough. By November 2004, police had questioned 110 people and collected over 300 pieces of information, yet the case remained unsolved. Satomi's grieving parents did everything they could to keep her memory alive. Her father, Tatsuji, even wrote about the case on his blog, hoping for new leads. In March 2006, despite her absence, Satomi was honored with a diploma at her school's graduation ceremony. 2 years after the murder, a Japanese TV show brought in FBI profilers to create a new composite sketch of the suspect. But even with their help, no progress was made. In 2008, the Kitaguchi family offered a 3 million yen reward for information, yet the suspect remained unidentified. The case became one of Hiroshima's most well-known unsolved murders, frequently discussed in news programs and online forums. It seemed as though the murderer had disappeared without a trace. But in 2018, 14 years later, the truth finally came to light because of an entirely different crime. On April 13, 2018, police in Ube Yamaguchi Prefecture received a report about a workplace altercation. A 35-year-old man named Manabu Kashima had kicked a junior coworker in the back of the thigh. Described as a grumpy and aggressive man, he was known for mistreating his subordinates. The incident wasn't severe, but Kashima was taken in for questioning. During routine fingerprinting, the police noticed Kashima acting extremely nervous. His hands were sweaty and shaking, and he avoided eye contact. Suspicious, they ran his fingerprints through the database, and what they found was shocking. His prints matched those from the 2004 Kitaguchi murder case. Further analysis confirmed that his DNA also matched the sample found under Satomi's nails. After nearly 14 years, the mystery was finally solved. When confronted with the evidence, Kashima initially denied involvement, but under intense questioning, he eventually confessed. He claimed the murder was not premeditated, but rather a spontaneous act. Investigators dug into his past. Born in Shimonoseki, Yamaguchi Prefecture, Kashima had a troubled upbringing. He wasn't biologically related to his father, which created tension in his family. His father controlled every aspect of his life, dictating his education and extracurricular activities, which led to Kashima developing a volatile temper. After high school, he moved to Ube for work and lived alone in a dormitory for metalworkers. On October 4, 2004, the day before Satomi's murder, Kashima had woken up late and missed work. Likely afraid of getting in trouble, he procrastinated and wandered around, eventually traveling to Hiroshima. What led him to Satomi's house remains unclear, but that day he brutally ended the life of a girl who had a bright future ahead of her. On May 24, 2018, Kashima was officially charged with the murder of Satomi Kitaguchi and the attempted murder of her grandmother Michio. After years of pain and unanswered questions, Satomi's family finally had closure. The Osaka Ripper. Yasutoshi Kamada was known to his friends and family as a quiet, friendly man, but behind closed doors, he was a serial killer who murdered 5 women over 10 years. It all began in 1985 in Osaka, Japan. Kamada invited a 46-year-old woman to dinner, and everything seemed normal at first, but once they were alone in his apartment, he made a move on her. When she rejected him, he snapped. His anger turned violent, and he strangled her to death, but he didn't stop there. He also dismembered her body. His next victim was a college student. Kamada tricked her by inviting her out for sushi, only to repeat the same gruesome crime. As his confidence grew, he even sent a letter to the police daring them to catch him. The letter contained details only the killer would know, making it clear he was mocking the authorities. Then came his most horrifying crime. He kidnapped a 9-year-old girl. When she screamed, Kamada panicked and killed her. Unlike his other victims, he didn't cut up her body. Instead, he dumped her in the mountains, later explaining that she was small enough to fit in a box without being dismembered. Shockingly, he even called her school and demanded ransom money, pretending she was still alive. Kamada was eventually arrested, but not for murder. He was caught for robbery, which briefly put a stop to his killings. But prison didn't change him. As soon as he was released, he went back to killing, taking 2 more victims the same way, strangling them and cutting up their bodies. His crimes finally caught up to him in 1995, 10 years after his killing spree began. A fingerprint on his taunting letter, along with other evidence, led to his arrest. In 2016, Kamada was executed, bringing an end to the horrifying case of the Osaka Ripper. Futoshi Matsunaga was one of Japan's most terrifying criminals, known as the mind control killer. Between 1996 and 1998, he was responsible for at least 7 deaths, though the true number may never be known. His ability to manipulate people into doing terrible things made his crimes even more shocking. Futoshi Matsunaga was born on April 28, 1961, in Fukuoka, Japan. He was a bright student with excellent grades, but what set him apart was his charm and ability to talk his way into anything. He had a smooth, confident personality that made him popular. However, behind his friendly smile was something much darker. Even as a child, Futoshi had a bad temper and often got into trouble. Teachers struggled to control him, and he had little respect for authority. He was highly intelligent, but he used his intelligence to manipulate others instead of doing good. Over time, he became an expert at controlling people's thoughts and actions. At 19, Futoshi got married and had a child, but he didn't stay loyal. He had multiple affairs, one of which was with Junko Ogata, an old classmate. Junko was kind and hardworking, but under Futoshi's influence, she became a shell of her former self. He convinced her that her family hated her and manipulated her into moving in with him. When Junko's mother tried to stop him, he assaulted her and used this as another way to control Junko. In 1985, Futoshi started an antique business, but it was just a front. He made his real money by scamming and blackmailing people. He enjoyed tormenting his employees, often sneaking up behind them and shocking them with a stun gun. By the age of 24, he had already cheated people out of millions of yen. When the police finally started investigating him in 1992, he and Junko went on the run. While hiding from the law in 1993, Futoshi met a married woman with 3 children. She fell in love with him, not knowing his true nature. He convinced her to leave her husband and move in with him. 5 months later, one of her children died under suspicious circumstances. Less than a year later, she also mysteriously died. Though never proven, many believe this was Futoshi's first taste of murder. One of Futoshi's next victims was a man named Kumio Toria. He tricked Kumio into revealing his secrets, then used this information to blackmail him. Futoshi moved into Kumio's apartment where he kept both Kumio and his young daughter Tokume as prisoners. For 2 years, he tortured them, forcing Tokume to hurt her own father. In 1996, Kumio died from the abuse. Futoshi made Tokume help dispose of her father's body, even forcing her to drink a broth made from his remains. After Kumio's death, Futoshi continued his cycle of manipulation and abuse. He targeted another woman, convinced her he would marry her, then cheated her out of millions of yen. He also abused her and her child, shocking them with electricity and making them do horrible things. The woman eventually escaped by jumping out of a window, but by the time police arrived, Futoshi had already disappeared. In 1997, Junko finally tried to escape from Futoshi's control, but he refused to let her go. He tricked her into thinking he was dead, only to reappear and force her family to pay him money. Instead of leaving, he took over their home and turned them into his prisoners. Inside the house, Futoshi brainwashed the family. Junko's parents, sister, brother-in-law, and their children were all trapped with him. He convinced them that he was a great leader and forced them to obey him. Over time, many of them became completely under his control. But once Futoshi had drained their bank accounts, he no longer had use for them. In December 1997, he ordered Junko to kill her own father using electric shocks. The next month, he made her sister and brother-in-law kill their mother. One by one, he eliminated the family members, using his mind games to make them do the killing for him. By 2002, only Junko and one other person remained alive. Futoshi's grip on Junko was weakening, and she finally saw a chance to escape. She went to the police and they arrested Futoshi. When the authorities searched the house, they uncovered the horrifying truth about what had happened. Futoshi Matsunaga was sentenced to death in 2005, and Junko was also sentenced to prison for her role in the crimes. To this day, many people in Japan refuse to speak about this case because of how disturbing it was. Kiyotaka Katsuta was a firefighter chief, a man known for saving lives during the day, but in secret he was a dangerous criminal responsible for over 300 crimes. Imagine Japan in the 1970s, a time when the economy was booming. People trusted Katsuta, seeing him as a local hero, but behind his good reputation was a dark truth. He was leading a double life. Katsuta was born into a wealthy family, but he was never satisfied. Even as a kid, he got into trouble and ended up in juvenile detention for stealing. That was just the beginning. By day, he worked hard as a firefighter, providing for his family and earning respect. But at night, his obsession with luxury, fancy cars, women, and the thrill of crime turned him into a violent predator. He targeted women who worked in hostess clubs, places where women entertained men while they drank. These women often left work, carrying a lot of cash. Katsuta would wait outside the clubs, attack these women when they finished their shifts, rob them and kill them. Despite his crimes, police never caught him at first. They claimed there wasn't enough evidence, but it's likely that crimes against these women weren't taken as seriously back then. The most shocking part was how well Katsuta hid his crimes. He wasn't just any criminal, he was a master of deception. He worked hard, earned promotions, and became a respected firefighter chief. No one suspected that the same man who saved lives was also taking them. In 1983, Katsuta was finally arrested. He admitted to killing 7 people, but investigators believed the real number was over 20.